Good morning, it is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. A big day ahead.
The Chancellor says Britain will not return to austerity, but admits fair and necessary choices will be taken as she prepares to unveil her budget later today.
We'll be live in Downing Street to assess what Rachel Reeves' announcements mean for you and for her own political future.
Donald Trump refuses to set a deadline to reach a peace deal for Ukraine, but confirms his special envoy will visit Vladimir Putin next week.
Lawyers voice their anger at plans to remove trial by jury for all but the most serious cases.
Well, later in the programme, we'll be hearing your stories ahead of the budget, from farmers to pub owners.
And lava flies 1,000 feet over Hawaii's Mount Kilauea volcano as it roars back to life. A very good morning to you. Welcome. It's budget day and it's make or break time for Chancellor Rachel Reeves. There have been weeks of speculation about what she will announce and how it will affect all of our finances. We will find out at lunchtime. But this morning, she's promised that Britain will not return to austerity.
So among a raft of tax raises, the Chancellor is expected to announce an extension in the freeze on income tax thresholds that will affect an awful lot of workers. And ahead of her announcement, the Treasury has released this clip.
So today, I'm going to take the fair and the necessary choices to deliver on our promise of change. I'm not going to return Britain back to austerity, nor will I lose control of public spending with more reckless borrowing. I will take action to help families with the cost of living. We've already frozen rail fares, begun rolling out free breakfast clubs, and we've raised the national living wage for millions of working people. And today I will go further. I will take action to cut hospital waiting lists by protecting record investment in our NHS and tackling waste in the public sector so that your money goes towards frontline services.
So a bit of a flavour about the messaging she wants to get out this morning. An awful lot to discuss today. But first, let's look at what we do know so far about the Chancellor's plans.
Well, last night, Rachel Reeves announced that the national living wage and the national minimum wage would be increased.
She's also said that NHS prescription charges in England will be frozen for the second year in a row.
Rail fares are also set to be frozen for the first time in 30 years.
And the state pension is set to rise by more than £550 a year from April. That's under the triple lock.
There's going to be a crackdown on benefits fraud.
And the Health Secretary said today the government will expand taxes on sugary drinks. That would include milkshakes and also pre-packaged coffees.
So lots of little line items there for us to expect later. Tamara joins us now from Downing Street. Tamara, before we get into some of those little line items, what is the big framing of this morning, and just how tough a job does the Chancellor have?
Well, all budgets are significant, but this is particularly significant because there's a real sense in Westminster that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor could be in real jeopardy if this budget does not land well. We've had this kind of chaotic run-up with suggestions of an income tax rise, which were then rowed back upon. The big picture message from the Chancellor is what she calls fair but necessary choices. And I think for necessary, you can read very difficult. The centrepiece of it is expected to be a wage increase for the lowest paid, a rise in the national living wage to £12.71 an hour, and also a rise for those under 21 as well. So we're looking at about a grand and a half extra a year in their pockets. But the picture for most people is expected to be tax rises, either people being dragged into higher income tax bands or seeing a whole, what's been known in Westminster as a kind of smorgasbord of tax rises in different areas. There'll be a raid on pensions and on savers and on electric cars. There'll be a whole variety of things which will go up a little bit. Rachel Reeves will say that this £20 to £30 billion black hole has opened up. She'll blame forces beyond her control and say that these choices are necessary to get things back on track. The criticism she'll face, though, of course, is that a year ago, when she raised national insurance, she said she wouldn't be coming back for more, and the Conservatives are likely to go on the attack there. They've said that this is not economic necessity, it is political weakness. Rachel Reeves will say that Labour don't want to return to austerity. They want to keep investment spending high, but they're also not going to go on a borrowing spree, and that is because they need to reassure the markets that things will remain stable. They also need to reassure Labour MPs who are very jittery at the moment about their unpopularity. There's frustration I pick up in government that Labour MPs didn't want cuts to the welfare budget, but they also don't want to break their promises on raising tax. They are the audiences, but also, of course, the public at home.
Tamara, thank you very much indeed. Tamara Cohen there outside number 11 for us this morning.
We want to bring you some pictures this morning that the Met Police these are pictures of tractors, obviously, and the Met Police have banned farmers from bringing their tractors to protest against proposed inheritance tax changes. But as you can see, some are making their way into central London regardless. There was sort of a big queue of them over the other side of the river this morning. The police said demonstrators were not allowed to bring any kind of vehicle, including agricultural ones, to the protests in Whitehall due to serious disruption that they might cause in the area. Obviously, some have ignored that. I mean, interesting, of course, the farmers were one of the centerpieces last year. They're unlikely to be this year, but essentially, I guess they'll be protesting it not getting a reversal. Optimistic if you think you're going to, given the other taxes that are going to have to go up today. Yeah, we're going to be talking to a farmer actually later on the programme as well to get their perspective on this. But my goodness, it's interesting, isn't it? I was going to say it's going to be a big budget, but it feels that some of the really, really big decisions perhaps may have been ducked. Is that fair? Well, we'll find out. Right? We'll find out. The big question to me is still, how big is this hole? How much does she have to raise? And again, I find the papers and our colleagues leaning towards a £30 billion number. If that is it, then that freeze in the income tax bands that we were talking about and Tamara was framing, that only raises 7 or 8. And I'm not sure, as long a list as we've touched on of smaller ones, that you reach 30. So you know how we normally talk about the rabbit out of the hat of some kind of giveaway? If she has to raise 30, there still needs to be a rabbit out of the hat of a big tax hike that we might not have talked about yet, or they've prepared the ground very effectively and it's only going to be sort of half that amount and we kind of know most of what's in it. But we'll find out. Yeah, we will. Typically, they try and leak the bad news early so that Rachel Reeves can stand up and have a kind of moment in the sun, if you like. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see if we really do. Let us know what you're hoping for from today's budget as well. Any other questions, we can try and get some answers for you. You can email us at mornings@sky.uk or also find us on social media as well. And we're going to have full team coverage throughout. We'll be hearing from Darren Jones, of course, formerly Chief Secretary to the Treasury and now Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. That's in a few moments' time. Then we'll be talking to Lord Hammond, the former Chancellor, at 7:30. So stay tuned for all of that. Now, Donald Trump says momentum is building behind his proposed Ukraine peace plan, telling reporters overnight that negotiations are making progress and that Russia has now agreed to a number of concessions. So in a further sign of stepped-up diplomacy, Mr Trump confirmed that his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is going to travel next week for talks with Vladimir Putin. It's all part of efforts to shape a deal.
We're having good talks. We started with Russia. We're having some talks with Russia. Ukraine is doing well. I think they're pretty happy about it. They'd like to see it end. And we won't know for a little while, but we're making progress.
You said, what are the big sticking?
We settled 8 wars, and I thought this would be one of the easier ones because of my relationship with President Putin. But this is probably one of the more difficult ones. There's a lot of hatred.
What about security guarantees and Ukraine?
Well, we're working that out with Europe. Europe will be largely involved in that. We're working that out with Europe. Europe really wants to see it end if possible.
While he was on the plane to Florida, Donald Trump also defended an extraordinary leak of a conversation between his lead negotiator, a man called Steve Witkoff, and a Russian official last month, where Mr Witkoff coaches his counterpart on how to deal in advance with that deal with Trump. Well, in the transcript obtained by Bloomberg News, Witkoff says to Yari Ushakov,
Now, me to you. I know what it's going to take to get a peace deal done. Donetsk and maybe a land swap somewhere. He also said, I would make the call and just reiterate that you congratulate the president on his achievement, that you supported it.
Well, let's cross now to our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett. Ivor, there's an awful lot kind of moving behind the scenes, isn't there, on the story about any potential peace deal with Ukraine. What do you make about this leak of the conversation between Steve Witkoff and his Russian counterpart?
Yeah, it's an extraordinary leak, isn't it? An extraordinary revelation that Bloomberg have got hold of. They've got hold of this recording of this phone conversation last month between Steve Witkoff, the point man for the US on these negotiations, and Yuri Yushakov on the Russian side. He's a senior figure in the Russian negotiating team. He's Vladimir Putin's foreign policy advisor. And in this call, as you say, it appears to show that the Americans were coaching the Russians on how to approach Donald Trump regarding a peace plan for Ukraine. This call took place middle of last month, just after the Americans, with Witkoff central to it, agreed this 20-point peace plan for Gaza. And in this conversation, Witkoff is suggesting to the Russians that they try to do the same on Ukraine. So it appears this to be the basis, and this was the genesis for this 28-point plan that the Americans produced at the end of last week, that one-sided plan, very much in Russia's favour. It seemed obvious that the Russians had heavy involvement in the drafting of it, and now it appears we know why. Not only that, Witkoff also suggested to the Russians that Putin makes a call to Trump to propose this this plan for the Gaza-style peace plan for Ukraine. And we know that they did speak for 2.5 hours in the middle of October, the day before Zelensky visited the White House. That was a visit that descended into a shouting match in the Oval Office, and now it appears we know why that happened too, because the goalposts for Zelensky had changed. He had gone into that meeting thinking that he was there to try and persuade Donald Trump to give him long-range US missiles to fire on and deep into Russian territory. But actually, it now turns out that the Americans were already thinking about a peace plan with Vladimir Putin. Now, Donald Trump has dismissed these reports as standard negotiating tactics on the part of Witkoff. The Russians, too, say it's just an attempt to hinder progress in the peace talks. But this matters because it appears to confirm what the Ukrainians and the Europeans, I think, have long feared, that the Americans are not independent arbiters in this process.
I guess all of that could be background details if a peace deal is done that both sides accept. Where are we on that? I mean, I don't think it's necessarily obviously a done deal or that optimistic, but it's much less pessimistic than it was sort of 5 or 6 days ago. Is that fair?
Well, it depends who you listen to. I think all the optimism is coming, as always, from Donald Trump. He said that the Russians are prepared to make concessions, with the Ukrainians now having agreed, it appears, to a plan with the US and one they're happy with. But I'm not that clear, actually, what concessions the Russians are prepared to make, because all the noises we've been hearing from the Moscow side in the past 24, 48 hours is that they're not prepared to make any concessions at all. They haven't commented directly on this kind of second plan, this 19-point plan that the Ukrainians are happy with. But we have had snippets. So on Monday night, Ushakov again, he said that the reports of this plan are unconstructive, not acceptable to Russia. Then yesterday we heard from Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, and he said that if this new agreement erased key understandings, it would be a fundamentally different situation. To me, that suggests that it's not something Russia is going to agree with. But we'll have to wait and see. Witkoff is supposedly heading to Moscow again, probably early next week. But even if Russia doesn't agree, will the US be pressuring them into something they're not happy with? I very, very much doubt it.
Ivor, great stuff as always. Thanks so much.
We want to talk now about something that could be one of the biggest shake-ups to how we do justice in this country ever, because it feels like for so long, of course, the right to be tried by jury by 12 of your fellow citizens has been at the bedrock, really, of justice. And yet we've got these leaked proposals that would see only the most serious of cases put before a jury.
The Law Society says the curbs, which are aimed at reducing court backlogs, would go too far. Sky News understands the changes are expected to be formally announced next week. Molly's here to talk us through this. So, Molly, just frame for us as well the background, which is a lot of court backlogs that has to be solved. There was this big report into it by Brian Leveson. What did he recommend? What's in this leaked memo from the Justice Secretary, David Lammy?
So firstly, the context, as you say, is the delays, the backlogs, one eye on the budget. This is costly. Jury trials are expensive. They take a long time. That's the context. As you say, Sir Brian Leveson, the former Court of Appeal judge, in the summer made a series of recommendations. But if the government go the way that we think they are going to go, they'd be going somewhat further than what he suggested. Essentially, what they want to do is create a kind of intermediate court. So that's between the magistrates with lesser offences and the Crown Court with much more serious offences, that might see trials for people serving potentially sentences of up to 5 years, a judge sitting alone. Brian Leveson actually suggested a judge alone or 2 magistrates, and only for up to 3 years, whereas the government, it looks like they're going the way of up to 5 years. So that's dealing with lots of quite serious violent offences, lots of fraud, lots of robbery charges, with only guaranteed jury trials for much more serious offences, so murder, for rape, manslaughter, and what's being described as kind of public interest. So that's your terrorism charges and things like that.
Deal, isn't it? I mean,
it's a really big deal.
I just think it's worth stepping back for a minute, because I know, obviously, the most serious, murder, rape, manslaughter will still be tried by jury, and obviously there is this sort of appalling backlog that is not good for anyone. But it just, for me, I don't know, it feels like such a big change. And I'm also thinking about, the whole point of a trial by jury is that it's random people, right?
Yeah.
So it's representative of society.
Yeah.
Judges are not representatives of society. They are predominantly white, male, and middle class, or wealthy, some would say as well, right?
Yeah, it's why you've got the criminal bar and lots of barristers saying you're ripping up an ancient and fundamental part of our justice system. They're really worried about it. You've obviously also got, as we've seen over the summer with cases like Epping and, injunctions and things going to the High Court, the danger of some of it, say critics, of it becoming quite politicised. It's much easier to lodge a kind of political argument against the decision of a judge than it is against the decision of a jury representing society. So there's lots of dangers. People are pretty worried about it. It is a massive shift. But politically, we know that David Lammy sort of coming into that position in September, it was a big thing for him. It was seen that Shabana Mahmood, now Home Secretary, sort of gripped the prisons crisis, and he really wants to grip the court crisis, but it's going to be controversial.
Just quickly on the numbers here, 78,000 cases awaiting completion in England and Wales.
Yep.
At the end of 2019, it was 38,000. So it is, something's got to be done. Yeah. If they go further than that Leveson inquiry, though, they're just going to welcome the kind of criticisms and the backlash.
Now, of course, it is budget day, which means that any interview with government ministers before the budget comes fraught with difficulty, because any question you put to them, they're just going to say, you have to wait for a few hours. But there has been an awful lot of trailing for this budget, and there's an awful lot we do know about what is going to be in it, and there's a few controversial things as well, not least, of course, the freezing of the income tax thresholds and, as Molly was just talking about as well, not in the budget, but a very big potential story here with the courts. I spoke to Darren Jones earlier, who's Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, who, of course, previously worked very closely with Rachel Reeves, so he is a man who does know what's in the budget. Thank you very much for being with us. I feel like we don't normally get a government minister on budget day. The theory is, there's not that much to say before the budget, so I'm quite interested that you decided to do the interview today, which I guess it means you've got something to say. So I guess what's your kind of... We live in hope. What's your main message this morning, then?
Well, look, this is a budget that's going to help tackle the cost of living. It's going to keep our investment in the NHS and get waiting lists down, and it's going to bring down the national debt, because we know that's been a real problem for us over the last 14, 15 years, where we're spending £1 in £10 of taxpayers' money paying debt interest, which no one wants to do, of course. So this is going to be a big budget that drives against those issues. These are the public's concerns. That's why there are concerns in government. And obviously, whilst I can't confirm the detail of the budget, the Chancellor will present that later to Parliament today.
Is welfare spending going to go up after the budget?
So welfare spending isn't set at a budget. It's a demand-led budget. So if you become a pensioner or you become sick, you have a right to claim for certain types of support. So what happens is the Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts how much they think might be spent on welfare. But do we think the rate of increase in welfare spending is sustainable? No, we don't. And that's why we've got a ministerial colleague, Stephen Timms, doing a review things like the youth guarantee to try to get that down in the future.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's been an awful lot of leadership speculation. You know, is this a budget that is more about, you know, making sure Keir Starmer's still here to fight the next election, as in he doesn't face a leadership challenge, rather than winning the next election?
No. I mean, we've got another 3 years, another 3 budgets probably to go until the 2029 election. This is a budget that's dealing with the public's concerns and the world as we find it. I mean, the Chancellor's made no secret of the fact that it's a challenging budget because of what's going on, whether it's on the cost of government debt or the changing global tariffs and trade in the economy and those types of issues. But no, this is a budget which meets the needs of the country and helps deliver on our promise of change.
There's been lots of speculation about some kind of property tax, you know, on homes above £2 million. Would you be hit by that?
Would I be? Well, I don't know what the tax is, you know.
Yeah, you do. Of course you do.
Well, actually, I do.
You do know, you just don't want to say
I'll be
what
honest,
it is.
I do know, but I can't tell you. So the Chancellor will tell you later. What I can tell you is that I do not live in a mansion. And so, subject to whatever the Chancellor announces later, I don't know. I mean, I don't live in a mansion. I suppose it's the root of your question. It'd be nice to, I suppose.
There's also been a lot of speculation about freezing personal allowances. So if that happens, it would mean people will be paying more income tax, correct?
Personal allowance is the amount that you get to earn before you pay tax. And that's kind of set at a certain rate. And it will be for the Chancellor to decide in the budget later alongside other tax measures.
If you freeze the personal allowances, that means people will be paying more income tax, correct?
It depends if your pay goes up. So if you freeze, say, this is not the right numbers, but just to round them off, if the personal allowance is £10,000 and you earn under £10,000, you don't pay tax. And if you earn over £10,000, you do pay tax.
I think, with respect, I think you're dancing on the head of a pin here, right? You know, if you freeze the personal allowances, that means that people will pay more income tax. That is right, isn't it?
Only if their pay goes above the threshold. If their pay doesn't change, then it doesn't change their situation.
You know, but wage inflation happens, right, doesn't it? And also if you're freezing it, as opposed to, you know, it going up, which is what it's currently projected to do, that means people will be paying more income tax.
If their pay goes above a threshold, then they'd pay more than that when they were below the threshold.
So that's yes.
Well, practically, yes, if they earn more above the threshold than they did before.
I guess people would say, you know, if you're paying more income tax, then that effectively means there's been a rise in income tax.
Well, income tax is measured by the headline rate alongside national insurance and VAT. This is the percentage you might pay depending on your level of income. And, of course, we have a manifesto commitment not to change the headline rates of income tax, national insurance.
I know why you're answering in this way, because you want to be able to say that you haven't broken the manifesto pledge on raising income tax. But for most people, if you're effectively bringing in a policy that means people will be paying more income tax, that's a rise, isn't it? It's effective. It's a manifesto breach by stealth.
Well, the first thing is there's a lot of speculation in that question, so we'll have to wait and see what the budget says. All I'm saying to you, Sophie, is that you pay income tax in 2 ways, depending on if you meet a threshold to start paying it, and then depending on how much you earn, what the rate of income tax is. That's what we call the headline rates. So it's lower if you earn lower amounts, higher if you earn higher amounts as a progressive taxation.
There's a lot of words to say that people will be paying more income tax.
No, because the budget hasn't been delivered yet. All I'm saying is I'm explaining how income tax is structured, and you're asking me if certain things are manifesto breaches or not, and all I'm saying is there was a manifesto commitment not to increase the headline rates of income tax, national insurance and VAT, which we obviously take very seriously.
So it wouldn't be a breach? If people end up paying, if you freeze the personal allowances and it means people pay more income tax as a result, that still wouldn't mean that your people are paying more income tax under a Labour government?
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals because it might send everyone off crazy. We'll have to wait for the budget later. All I'm saying is that there's a threshold and there's a rate. And we had a very clear manifesto commitment not to increase the headline rates of income tax.
Now, I know you've obviously had your head in the budget as well, but I need to ask too about this leaked memo from the Ministry of Justice that is proposing scrapping trial by jury for everything apart from rape, murder and manslaughter. I mean, this would be a huge change if it happens. How would you feel about it?
Well, look, it's unfortunate that policy documents are being leaked because the government's not actually made a decision on this one way or the other, to be honest. So I can't tell you what David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, wants to do. It may be that, and I've not seen the leak, and obviously government doesn't comment on leaks, so I don't know what the source of the document is. What I do know is that we've got, I think it's around 80,000 people in a backlog in the court system, which is a huge problem, not just for victims who might be waiting for justice to be served, but also for people who may be innocent but don't get proven innocent until the trial happens. So we've got to clear through the backlog. We've had an independent inquiry from Sir Brian Leveson who's a former judge who's looked at this. He's been very clear with us, you can't spend your way out of this problem. We've put more money in and increased the number of sitting days and all that sort of stuff, but there's still a kind of structural backlog in the court system, which we do have to try to get through. But as I say, the government hasn't made a decision one way or the other.
Yeah, I understand, and I know it's difficult to comment on leaks and stuff, but I am interested in what you, kind of Darren Jones, thinks about this, because it is such a big deal, right? That the whole point of justice in this country is that you be tried by, or judged by 12 of your fellow citizens, right? If it's a judge, then that changes everything. Judges aren't reflective of the population for a start. 90% of them are white, 65% of them are men. Yeah. By definition, they've had a university education. That would be justice decided by a certain sector of society.
Well, I suppose on the first part of your question, this all goes back to the Magna Carta, if we would want to get into it. But the Magna Carta is very clear that you have the right to a trial that is timely. I mean, what you don't want is to get clogged up in a system that takes years for justice or your innocence to be proven one way or the other, which is why the court system
I understand absolutely the backlog and the difficulty that has for victims, people who are on trial, all that kind of stuff. I totally get it. But this would be a huge change to the way we look at justice, right? Well, are you comfortable with it? Well, if it happens.
Well, as I say, the government hasn't made a decision, so I can't tell you whether I'm comfortable with it or not because we've not made a decision yet.
Come on, you can say you're comfortable with something without making a decision.
Well, I don't know the source of the leak, so I really can't tell you with any kind of credibility what it's about. To be honest,
I'm not saying whether or not you think it's going to happen or what the government's plans are. I'm asking what you think about something like this.
Well, look, there's lots of criminal cases that are without jury trial. There are some with jury trial. Ultimately, you want to make sure the Justice Service is meeting the needs of victims and prosecuting people who have committed crimes and making sure that they suffer the consequences. The backlog is making it harder to do that, so it's right the department looks at how to clear it.
Just talking about Rachel Reeves, you obviously work very, very closely with her. I'm sure you still do as well. She's done a few more kind of personal interviews recently where she's talked about the pressures, she's talked about mansplaining, she's talked about misogyny in the House of Commons too. What's your reflections on that? Do you think she gets a harder time because she's a woman?
I mean, I think probably, yeah. I mean, it's for her to say, right? It's not for me to judge that for her. But, I mean, I've seen lots of examples where I think it's probably unfair criticism of Rachel. I mean, being Chancellor of the Exchequer and being Prime Minister, two of the hardest jobs we have in running the country. I've worked very closely now with both of them, so I know firsthand how tough they are. And so I have a huge amount of respect for Rachel and for Keir with what they're trying to do.
How is she? Is she finding it OK?
I saw her yesterday and she seems great. I mean, Rachel, I mean, she's on fighting form. She's done this work. She's going to go out and deliver the budget and fight for the choices that she's made, and that's why she's our Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Now, I know you've got a busy morning, you've got lots to get to, but just finally, I really want to ask you about the Prime Minister in this 6-7 video, right? Do you know about... this thing, yeah. Do you know about it? Are you
Do you know, let me just go. I know nothing about TikTok or rappers, but someone sent me the lines. Apparently it's to do with a rapper from America and TikTok. I mean, I have no idea.
Do you feel that, actually, no matter how the budget goes, Keir Starmer has done one thing that is good for parents and teachers across the country in making 6-7 overnight deeply uncool?
Well, I mean, he seems to be having a great time with kids on his visit to a local school about our brilliant policy on funded childcare and school-based nurseries. I'm amazed he even knew what this was. I mean, he's 60-something, and I'm
in my
30s. I've got no idea what this is. I suppose my kids are too young to be on TikTok.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I still don't know what it is either.
6-7.
Now it's definitely done. I've just ended it. If it wasn't...
It's over.
Nail in the coffin, done. It's over. We're going to keep talking about the budget, building up, of course, to lunchtime after the break with Lord Hammond.
we are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Mornings with Ridge and Frost. A big day here in Westminster as we build up to the Chancellor's all-important budget at lunchtime. As we do continue that build-up, it's time to talk to a man who knows something about delivering a budget, or to the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Lord Hammond. Lord Hammond, a very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. The first big picture question I have is, given where we are, that I don't think anyone really wants to borrow more, that the Chancellor has some restive MPs that don't want to see significant spending cuts. Do you accept that taxes need to go up today?
Well, the Chancellor can't borrow more, not just because of her fiscal rules, but because of the market's willingness to lend. So she's constrained on borrowing, which means there are 3 other options: get the economy growing faster, raise taxes, or cut spending. Now, everybody's been trying to get the economy growing faster, and obviously that's the preferred route out of this, but perhaps we'll come back to that in a minute. The danger is that the tax increases she announces today undermine the drive for economic growth. So if she can't cut spending, she's going to have to raise taxes. But in terms of a sustainable, long-term way forward for this country, that is not a solution because it undermines growth. So she has got to show today that she has the willingness, the political strength to impose spending cuts. And I don't mean bogus spending cuts in the last year of the forecast, undefined, but real spending cuts that will start to impact on public services and people's experience. Because if we're not prepared to cut spending, we will not deliver the growth agenda, which the government rightly says has to be the #1 mission.
If that's not in it today, what does the market react?
Well, I think the market will see straight through it. If there is no willingness to address the fundamental underlying problem of public spending, the market will see that the fiscal position is not sustainable. And I say that because the public spending problem isn't going to go away. Population is getting older, demand for services is increasing. If we have a big challenge with public spending today, in 5 or 10 years' time, it's going to be much worse. And we have to start thinking about a sustainable way forward, to rethink the way we deliver public services, to rethink the boundary between what people pay for privately, what they expect to get from the state, what they pay for through tax, what they pay for through some other form of subscriptions or contributions.
One of the big sort of trade-offs to the Chancellors we've already touched on is what the public would accept, but what her own MPs would accept. Would an explicit manifesto breach be legitimate grounds for her MPs to force her out, or the public even to force her out? Or would you, if in all those constraints in mind, would you go ahead and put up income tax?
Look, it is important that politicians, when they make pledges, stick to them. But I do think the mood in the country is that the world has changed around us and things have to happen that may be very difficult. And I think the problem is less the public than the Parliamentary Labour Party, where a very large number of MPs who didn't actually expect to get elected in 2024 at all are now looking at a world in which they're probably going to lose their seats in 2029 and are clearly not very happy about it. And they will be particularly sensitive to breaching of manifesto commitments.
Do you expect an income tax hike or a big lever or not?
Well, it looks like she's shied away from that. I don't know how she's going to do this and make it add up without a big tax move like VAT or income tax. But she seems to have clearly signalled that that isn't the way she's going to go.
Clearly, there are some spending increases too, whether it's two-child benefit cap or the national living wage increase. Specifically on the latter, is that sensible at the time, given the pressure on business? But also, I guess, is it sensible with the workers' rights bill coming through, with the economy not that strong? Is it sensible for workers?
No, it isn't. Not sensible at all. And it completely contradicts her narrative of going for growth. You know, on the one hand, they've got a perfectly sensible idea that you focus on economic growth, and over time, that economic growth delivers for everybody. It delivers a more prosperous society. But then they immediately undermine it with things like the national insurance increase in the last budget, these continuous increases in minimum wages, which frankly, large parts of industry simply can't afford. Hospitality industry as a case in point. You know, many people in the hospitality industry earn significant amounts of money from tips, service charges, the tronc, but they can't access that unless they've got a job at minimum wage. And more people in the hospitality industry are telling us that they are literally teetering on the brink, that they will not be able to stand another assault. And the government itself, of course, is a huge employer of people on relatively low wages who will be affected through differentials, compression and so on by changes to the national minimum wage.
Is putting some kind of new property tax on properties above a certain value, it sounds like it'll be £2 million, sensible?
Well, I think it's something that's probably almost certainly going to happen. It will have an impact on the property market, but given where the Chancellor is, I would have to say that is one of the least bad options that she's probably going to be looking at today.
I wanted to talk more broadly about the mood in the country and the politics all around us. Your nickname when you were Chancellor, I think you're obviously well aware of, was often Spreadsheet Phil. I don't know if you thought that was derogatory or even whether you quite liked it.
I think it was meant to be derogatory, but I rather liked it.
So this is what I was going to get to. I guess if it wasn't, therefore, that tough to take, but do you think when you see people say Rachel from accounts, that is grossly unfair, or is it comparable to Spreadsheet Phil? What's your view on all of that?
Well, I think it is. It's derogatory, and I don't like the use of derogatory phrasing in political debate. Rachel Reeves is perfectly capable of preparing and delivering a budget. There's no doubt about that. She's in a very difficult place. I think, to be honest, she and Keir Starmer understand the problems. They articulated them well in the run-up to the general election. They just haven't delivered on what they said they would deliver. They have not focused primarily on growth. They've done a number of measures, and it looks like they'll do more today, which are actually undermining the growth agenda. GDP per capita, which is the best measure of how well off people feel, has flatlined in this country since the pandemic. And getting economic growth moving again is the key to getting people feeling better about the economy, about themselves, about our political system. And frankly, what I see when I look out there now is a political system which is moving to extremes, populism, extremist positions, and that is a reflection of people feeling that the economy is no longer working for them, that they're no longer getting better off year after year.
So to wrap things up, Lord Hammond, you said maybe we'll come back to it at the start. What is the solution? I mean, is it some of the ideas that Liz Truss tried to put forward, but perhaps rushed too quickly on, or what's the magic solution to deliver growth?
Well, Liz Truss didn't get it right, but there are clearly things that need to be done to drive growth in the economy, and they will be painful because essentially we will drive growth in this economy by sacrificing some consumption in order to increase investment. We have just about the lowest investment performance of any G20 economy. That's what's dragging Britain backwards, and we need to get our investment up to the levels of our peers, and we can only do that by reducing a little bit the amount we consume today in order that we can consume more tomorrow.
Lord Hammond, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for stopping by. The former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Lord Hammond, with us there, embracing his nickname a little bit there.
Yeah.
By the way, we embrace being politics, business, markets geeks as well.
Yes,
Geeks are okay.
It's true. We like geeks, particularly when there are some pretty difficult economic problems to solve, right? Always interesting, I think, to get the perspective of someone who is perhaps not quite on the political front line anymore, and then you can have a much more, I think, productive conversation. Really interesting stuff. Now, of course, we'll be talking an awful lot about the budget with relation to what is happening in England, but very important as well to reflect on the impact it's going to be having in Scotland too, and other places around the United Kingdom as well. And I'm very pleased to say that joining us now is the Scottish Housing Secretary, Mari McCallan. Great to have you with us. Thank you for being here. So what do you want the Chancellor to be announcing later then? What are you hoping for?
So I think naturally, as you would expect, the Scottish National Party government want to see a budget that works for Scotland. So for our part, we want to see investment in public services after, as far as we're concerned, far too many years of underinvestment. We want to see action that stimulates growth in the economy, and we have some particular ways that that can be done in Scotland. And then critically, Sophie, we want to see a budget which tackles head-on the cost of living, in particular energy prices, something which we think the public have given up hope, frankly, after so many years of increases and accumulating debt. They've given up hope on the prospect of that being fixable.
On energy prices, because there's been a lot of talk about green levies, right? And I think that a lot of people would believe in going green and in being kind to the environment, but, it kind of hits up against the brutal reality of the cost of living sometimes. Is that something that you would welcome the government looking at them?
So I shouldn't like to see that unless the investment was replaced elsewhere. So if the cuts are to green levies, I need to see that replenished, because we know that better energy efficiency and moving to net zero systems in our housing is not only the right thing to do for the climate crisis, but equally energy efficiency is critical to bringing bills down. But we have
heard from the Exchequer boss yesterday, I thought was quite interesting, where he said that actually it's wrong to have the green levies through energy bills, which are not progressive, because obviously, if you're poor or wealthy, then you kind of pay the same. But should be done through general taxation instead.
Well, I think that's my point. If cutting the green levies is the route to bringing bills down, then we need to replenish that elsewhere. But we put forward a proposition of a social tariff. That's something that we've been working with experts in Scotland on, energy consumer experts. It's an at-source discount according to factors like numbers of people in the home, income, your requirement to use energy, so people whose medical conditions require them to use more, it would discount their energy according to that. We think it could save modelled bills up to £700 a year and take over 200,000 people out of extreme fuel poverty in Scotland. So that's what we've called for.
What's your opinion on the Rosebank oil field? Do you support that development or not?
So we have a position in Scotland. Firstly, I should say that the decisions over oil and gas licensing do not sit with us. Perversely, you might say, given that it's Scotland's energy. But our position for some time now has been that we should assess every application according to both climate compatibility and energy security. And we believe that doing that, you will come to the right decision on a case-by-case basis.
So what's the answer on Rosebank then?
So I'm not the minister, my government are not the ministers who sit with all the details of those assessments.
You have an opinion though, don't you, surely? I mean, I'm not a minister, but I've got opinions on things as well.
Yeah, absolutely, but I think what we're saying is that you have to do that rigorous case-by-case, evidence-based.
So what do you think on Rosebank then?
Well, if it could pass a climate compatibility test and an energy security assessment, then it would go ahead, and if not, it would not. That's ultimately the position. That's what we have to do, facing up to both our requirements to decarbonise, our requirement to acknowledge that the North Sea Basin is declining and we must transition away. But equally, the fact that oil and gas has been a major factor in our economy and will continue to do so for some time, Sophie, whilst we transition.
Your government, of course, has partial control over taxes. We've got a lot of focus on what Rachel Reeves is going to do on, income tax, on council tax as well. Will you mirror any decisions? What's your view on it?
So the income tax position has been particularly uncomfortable for us, most of all because of the way it's been communicated. So the Chancellor, sort of flew a kite on income tax, appeared to retract from that somewhat, and in all of that we haven't been able, my Finance Secretary and my First Minister have not been able to have a conversation with the Chancellor, with the Prime Minister about this, despite the implications for Scotland.
Do you think that's because they think you'll just leak it?
I shouldn't think so. I mean, we need to be able to have these inter-ministerial government discussions so that we can plan, because, as you know, it could have an impact on our budget. Basically, our position is that the Chancellor should consider all approaches before cuts. We have adopted a progressive tax regime in Scotland where we have asked those able to pay a little bit more, and that has allowed us to invest more in public services and to have universal offers like free tuition, free prescriptions, bus travel, concessionary bus travel for under 22s and over 65s. We believe in generating funds to invest back into our public services and our economy, and progressive taxation is the way to do that.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Good to have you on
Thank
the
you.
programme this morning. Well, coming up, we are going to be talking about a new documentary about Julian Assange. The director is going to be right here in the studio speaking to him.
This is the moment Kim's life changed forever.
Mum, the doctor's coming in a minute and he's going to tell you that they need to amputate all your limbs. I didn't want to live like this.
This is the story of how she cheated death, rebuilt her life, and the extraordinary NHS team who made it happen.
This is the most precious gift I've ever received in my life.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
These slums, once gripped by fear and death.
There is far less bloodshed now, but it hasn't gone away.
Who's asking you to kill?
The police will give me the orders, and after I kill the target, I throw the gun away.
We try our best to uncover and unpick a fast-changing and deeply complex region.
These large waterways provided an excellent source of body disposal.
This is the Buriganga River, where victims who'd allegedly been shot dead were dumped.
Sheikh Hasina, how confident are you that she will stand trial?
She will stand trial, there's no doubt about that.
We're going to take you to the very heart of a criminal network, going undercover inside Southeast Asia's scam centres for the very first time.
We won't have any problems with police, it's okay.
Just seen Imran Khan leave, and as we understand it, he's just been shot in the leg.
They have decided that the only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
Sky News get the full story first.
Chinese vessels start encircling the boat we're on, blocking its path.
The Chinese are now deploying water cannons, firing it directly towards our boat. We've discovered doctors across Delhi dishing out pills like this, claiming they will provide a lifelong cure for homosexuality.
Rohingya people fleeing an escalating civil war.
The situation here in Cox's is desperate. An already insecure place does feel a lot more precarious.
You can't rule out further tax rises. It's exactly what she's going to have to do.
She'll be talking about that when it comes to the budget.
We'll be talking everything money as the Chancellor reveals what's in her budget.
This knows how it's going to play out if these tax rises are announced.
I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's data and forensics correspondent. We gather, analyse and visualise data to tell data-driven stories. I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there's an awful lot to talk about with the budget, but it is quite nice to take a beat and discuss something slightly different for a moment, right? And I should say the case, we're going to talk about Julian Assange next, because the case of the WikiLeaks founder has dominated news cycles and divided opinion for more than a decade. I can't actually believe it's been that long, fueling debate about press freedom and national security.
A new documentary lifts the curtain on the story behind the headlines with a behind-the-scenes look at Assange. God, we're really behind the scenes, behind the curtain of the Assange story.
Close these curtains.
Worst case scenario is someone comes in through this window, right?
Yeah.
We push these out and we just barricade ourselves in there.
As soon as something explodes, I will look for
The evidence we need. The collateral murder video, which shows a helicopter gunship killing innocent civilians. The Afghan war logs, the Iraq war logs. This guy, for me, has done a great service to the world in showing us the true nature of the wars that our governments ask us to fight.
Well, joining us now is the documentary's director, Eugene Jarecki. The documentary is called The $6 Billion Man. It's out on the 19th of December. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Why now for this story that, as Sophie mentioned in the intro, has been out and about and covered for a decade or more?
Well, two reasons. I mean, the time has never been more right for this story to be told. I think all of us know that something is changing in the world. There's a rise of perceived fascism around the world, especially in America. We see a huge crackdown on journalism, a huge crackdown on the public's very right to the truth. Well, this is a story about how that slope got so slippery. And so it couldn't be more important to think about the Julian Assange case, which many people don't really know the real story, and we tell it.
And I guess you used the word journalism there, and the touched on how it's changing in America. But he did plead guilty to breaching the Espionage Act. How do you balance those things out?
Sure. Well, many people don't realize this, but the U.S. dropped 17 counts of its 18 counts against Julian Assange. This was a spectacular embarrassment for America, who had besieged Assange and WikiLeaks for over a decade, and then ultimately had to concede that they really didn't have a case against him, except one thing. They conceded, yes, you're a publisher. Yes, you are protected by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. But shame on you for not knowing that we, America, have a little law called the Espionage Act that contradicts our Constitution. Shame on you. So it's an unbelievable outcome because it shines a light on exactly what a destructive instrument the U.S. Espionage Act is. It's unconstitutional, and it's an attack on the very most precious right we have, which is our right to information as human beings.
So I was about to say put aside the laws. I don't mean that, but put the whole set of the rules in context for today compared to when he originally started releasing documents, because we had things here very high profile, the Leveson inquiry, which I'm sure you know about, with phone hacking. Obviously, right now, you see the opposite side, where all sorts of private email exchanges are celebrated when they're released from the Epstein files, for example. If Julian Assange did originally what he did 20 years ago today, would he have been celebrated immediately, do you think?
I think the reason WikiLeaks came into such extraordinary controversy and celebration by so many millions around the world was that it wasn't just releasing private emails or something. It was releasing evidence of U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then it was releasing evidence of how U.S. diplomacy manipulates world events and controls the world in ways that those of us who believe in democracy would find toxic. And so that is what they were doing. And so what would happen today? The same thing that always happens. The powerful do not want the rest of us to know what they are doing. They don't want us to really know how the world works. But aren't we supposed to know that in democracy?
Why, with such a belief in justice and democracy, has he never faced the accusations of sexual harassment in his native Sweden?
Well, he did, as many people don't know, and they'll learn in the film. Julian Assange testified voluntarily in Sweden when two women did not accuse him of any sexual offense. What they wanted was an HIV test because they had had consensual but unprotected sex with him, and they tried to go to the police to get the police to compel an HIV test. I didn't know this. I thought there'd been a rape case in Sweden. There never was one. There was an inquiry because the prosecutor at the time leaked to the press the idea that women had come in and accused of rape. They had not. The prosecutor had said to the media, to tabloids, that Julian Assange had been accused of double rape. It was not true, it was unjust, and this person has been living with this ever since, and so have the women. A huge indignity was dealt to the women who did not go to the police for that purpose, and the Swedish government robbed them of that to play what looks like a game with the United States.
Just finally, you could have interviewed him for this documentary, but didn't?
No, I don't think, he was in prison. He was here at Belmarsh during the entire time we were making the film, and it would not have been my interest to interview him. This was an independent investigation into Assange. If I had found that Assange was a criminal, whether in Sweden or in the releasing of documents or anything else, I would have had to go there. That's my job. And we did not find that. We found he was a man far more sinned against than sinning, to quote Shakespeare.
Eugene, thanks so much for joining us. Really interesting.
Thank you again. It's December 19th here in theatres. We're very proud of that.
$6 billion man. We look forward to it. Eugene, thank you so much for joining us.
Now, before we leave you, we just want to take you to Hawaii briefly, because we have got these remarkable images coming through of the Kilauea volcano, one of the world's most active volcanoes, and you can see why, because right now it is erupting. Now, I should say this happens relatively frequently. It's happened dozens of times since last December. And to give you a bit of a sense of where it is, the volcano itself is situated 200 miles south of Honolulu.
Incredible pictures there. Time for final quick thoughts before the break at the end of the hour. We'll be building up to the budget stuff.
Yeah, we really will. We've been asking for your responses. We've had a few coming in, mainly around the cost of living. I think it's quite interesting. You know, Glenn talking about being a chef who works in hospitality. He's worried about inflation. Bill saying for years we've been a rip-off country. No surprise, I think, that this is why Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is saying that it's a priority. But I guess the question is, will people feel it in their pockets?
And we will continue to try and answer your questions in the next couple of hours of the programme as we continue build up to the budget at lunchtime today. Don't go anywhere.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilf, good morning from the both of us on a very, very big day.
Rachel Reeves says Britain will not return to austerity, but admits fair and necessary choices will be taken as she prepares to unveil her budget later today.
Dozens of farmers defy a police ban and descend on the capital in their tractors to protest against the Chancellor's decisions.
We'll be live in Downing Street to assess what Rachel Reeves' announcements mean for you and her own political future.
Also ahead, Donald Trump refuses to set a deadline to reach a peace deal for Ukraine, but confirms his special envoy will visit Vladimir Putin next week.
Lawyers voiced their anger at plans to remove trial by jury for all but the most serious cases.
Plus, we'll be hearing your stories ahead of the budget, from farmers to pub owners.
And lava flies 1,000 feet over Hawaii's Mount Kilauea as it roars back to life.
Good morning and welcome. It is budget day and it's make or break time for the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. There's been weeks of speculation about what she's going to announce and, of course, how it's going to affect all of our finances. We'll find that out at lunchtime. But this morning, she's promised that Britain will not return to austerity.
Among a raft of tax raises, the Chancellor is expected to announce an extension in the freeze on income tax thresholds, a move that will drag almost 1 million more people into paying higher income tax rates. Ahead of her announcement, the Treasury released this clip.
So today, I'm going to take the fair and the necessary choices to deliver on our promise of change. I'm not going to return Britain back to austerity, nor will I lose control of public spending, with more reckless borrowing. I will take action to help families with the cost of living. We've already frozen rail fares, begun rolling out free breakfast clubs, and we've raised the national living wage for millions of working people. And today I will go further. I will take action to cut hospital waiting lists by protecting record investment in our NHS and tackling waste in the public sector so that your money goes towards frontline services.
Well, there's an awful lot to discuss today. First, let's look at what we definitely know so far about the Chancellor's plans.
Well, last night, Rachel Reeves announced that the national living wage and the national minimum wage would be increased.
She's also said NHS prescription charges in England will be frozen for the second year in a row.
Rail fares are also set to be frozen for the first time in 30 years.
The state pension is set to rise by more than £550 a year. That's from April under the triple lock.
And there's going to be a crackdown on benefits fraud.
The Health Secretary said the government will expand taxes on sugary drinks so that they would include milkshakes and pre-packaged coffees.
And there'll also be a tourist tax, meaning visitors have to pay to stay in an area overnight, although it will be down to local mayors whether or not to actually put it into place.
Lots going on. I think the biggest thing, though, that many people are going to be focusing on is those tax rises. An awful lot of speculation on what's going to happen. The Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, insisted to this programme that if the government was to freeze the income tax threshold, then the government wouldn't have broken a manifesto promise. But he did admit it would lead to some people paying more income tax if their wages increased. With respect, I think you're dancing on the head of a pin here, right? You know, if you freeze the personal allowances, that means that people will pay more income tax. That is right, isn't it?
Only if their pay goes above the threshold. If their pay doesn't change, then it doesn't change their situation.
You know, but wage inflation happens, right, doesn't it? And also if you're freezing it, as opposed to, you know, it going up, which is what it's currently projected to do, that means people will be paying more income tax.
If their pay goes above a threshold, then they'd pay more than that when they were below the threshold.
So that's yes.
Well, practically, yes, if they earn more above the threshold than they did before.
Quite a revelation, I think, from him to basically acknowledge, in a kind of similar way, I guess, as to how he had last year, that, yes, national insurance went up, but it was paid for by employers, not employees. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, who's in Downing Street for us this morning. And Tamara, we're pretty sure that's going to be a big piece of the budget if it wasn't confirmed implicitly there by Darren Jones. The other big question, I guess, is not just what the line items are, but how on earth the Chancellor tries to sell this, to frame this set of tax increases.
That's right. In her last message before the budget, Rachel Reeves said this is about fair but necessary choices. And I think we know what she means by necessary. They are going to be, for many people, very difficult. The centrepiece of it is expected to be a rise in the national living wage to help the lowest paid with the cost of living. That's going to be going up to £12.71 an hour from next year. And there will also be a rise for those under 21. So it's to the tune of £1,000 to £1,500 a year to help the lowest paid. But as for the reaction from businesses, I think there's already concern from the hospitality industry and also some commentators on the left who say it could do more harm than good if it reduces the chances of businesses taking young people on. Elsewhere, the picture is, as we've discussed a lot over the last few weeks, tax rises, and it has been this kind of chaotic run-up to the budget with a suggestion of a big income tax rise to raise £7 or £8 billion, then knocked down again, and we're now expecting what's become known as a smorgasbord of different tax rises, basically a range of them across different areas, hitting potentially savers, people with large homes, the money people put aside for their pensions, which is expected to dominate the day. Rachel Reeves will stand up and say she has a £20 to £30 billion black hole to fill. She'll blame all sorts of factors, including Brexit and the pandemic and the legacy from the Conservatives, but she'll say that is why people will need to pay more. Her message to Labour MPs is that she has made the right choices. We know that they don't want to cut welfare. They made that clear in the summer, but equally they don't want to go and tell their constituents that they're going to break their promises on tax, and that has been the source of some frustration in government, I can tell you. The reason that this is being described as make or break is because the government is very unpopular. They're facing threats from the right and the left, and there's a sense of real jeopardy for Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer that they could be in danger if this budget does not land well.
Tamara, thank you very much indeed. Tamara Cohen speaking to us there. Do let us know, I should say, what you're hoping for from today's budget. Any questions, we can try and get some answers for you. You can email us at mornings@sky.uk or find us on social media at Ridge or Frost. I just want to bring some of the ones that we have had in already as well, because people have been coming in with their perspectives and point of views on social media. We had the chef, of course, saying that what he's most concerned about is inflation and the cost of living. I wondered if there's something you want to pick up.
Well, I think, it's funny, we reflected on that briefly with Lord Hammond, but you're putting up the national living wage and the national minimum wage. That is inflationary if people get wage increases. Of course, that puts pressure particularly on industries like hospitality, because there's a lot of people who are on that lower wage. Obviously, you've also got this £2 overnight charge, which local mayors will decide if they want to levy or not, but they're getting permission to that. Again, that's hospitality-related sector, so that's a tricky one for that sector.
And then a lot of people coming in as well on the tax thresholds as well. Sean pointing out that tax thresholds were frozen by the previous government, so it's not a rise by the present administration, he would argue. Although, of course, last time she sort of decided to put them up, so it feels like in respect to that, it would be in some ways. But it is a tactic that people have done before. That's definitely right. Terence saying whether personal allowances are raised or not, if you earn more, you pay more tax. Time to raise the top rates of income tax and tax £10 million a year for Premier League footballers. So I think there's going to be calls, aren't there, for perhaps the wealthier people to pay more. We can see that, for example, with Zach Polanski, the Green Party here yesterday. Some people are saying that actually that would be the fair way to do it.
Well, a lot of people always say that top rate, the 45% income tax rate, should just go to 50%. And it would be a very fair thing to do. It could raise a decent amount more without it kind of having to be a wealth tax and to force people to leave and things like that. So anyway, that never seems to be talked about.
Yeah, it's
an interesting one.
It is really interesting. And there was so much speculation as well about whether the government would just bite the bullet and put up the top rate of income tax too. It feels like, and obviously it's famous last words because we haven't seen the budget yet, but it feels like some of those really, really big kind of bold decisions perhaps step back from.
Although Lord Hammond made me think maybe not, because he was sort of saying, I'm not quite sure how she's going to fund it all, so that there might still be something we're not expecting, which is why it's going to be so fun. 12:30, of course, for the budget. We're going to talk to Baroness Morrissey, Helena Morrissey, about that in just a moment. One of Britain's greatest success stories in the world of finance. We'll get her views shortly.
Now, Donald Trump says momentum is building behind his proposed Ukraine peace plan, telling reporters overnight that negotiations are making progress and Russia has now agreed to a number of concessions.
Well, in a further sign of the stepped-up diplomacy, President Trump confirmed that his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, will travel next week for talks with President Putin as efforts to shape the deal intensify.
We're having good talks. We started with Russia. We're having some talks with Russia. Ukraine is doing well. I think they're pretty happy about it. They'd like to see it end. And we won't know for a little while, but we're making progress.
You said, what are the next steps?
We settled 8 wars, and I thought this would be one of the easier ones because of my relationship with President Putin. But this is probably one of the more difficult ones. There's a lot of hatred.
What about security guarantees and Ukraine?
Well, we're working that out with Europe. Europe will be largely involved in that. We're working that out with Europe. Europe really wants to see it end if possible.
Well, while he was on the plane to Florida, Donald Trump also defended an extraordinary leak of a conversation between his lead negotiator, Steve Witkoff, and a Russian official last month, where Steve Witkoff seems to coach his counterpart on how to advance the deal with Trump.
In the transcript obtained by Bloomberg News, Witkoff says to Yuri Ushakov, "Now me to you. I know it's going to take what it's going to take to get a peace deal done. Donetsk and maybe a land swap somewhere." He went on to say, "I would make the call and just reiterate that you congratulate the president on this achievement, that you supported it." So let's bring in our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett. Ivor, very good morning to you. Give us your perspective on all these revelations in the last 24 hours, but also where we actually are looking forward. Have we actually got any closer to a deal?
Well, Donald Trump seems to think so. He was sounding very optimistic on Air Force One there in that clip you played. He says the Russians had agreed to some concessions, but he didn't give any details as to what those are. And that's certainly not the impression I've been picking up here in Moscow over the last 24 hours. In fact, quite the opposite. I was at a press conference yesterday where the Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, was asked to give his impression on this latest peace plan, the one that Ukraine has agreed to. And he said that if it erased key understandings, then it would be a fundamentally different situation. Now, to me, that makes it pretty clear that this is not something that Russia is going to agree to. And I think that's because, of course, it removes all of those major concessions of the original plan that they wanted in place that crossed all those red lines of Ukraine. So Donald Trump sounding optimistic, but I'm not sure where that's come from. All eyes now on that key meeting next week when Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's negotiator-in-chief, comes to Moscow and supposedly seeks Russia's approval. But I'm not sure he'll be leaving with it.
And just talk us through this, what is the kind of latest when it comes to the deal itself, do you think?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's not clear. Ukraine supposedly has agreed to one, the 19 points, but Russia, it's up in the air whether they agreed to it or not. I think what's really interesting, though, is this revelation that you just mentioned there, this phone call that Bloomberg has reported between Steve Witkoff and Yuri Ushakov, who's Vladimir Putin's foreign policy advisor. It happened on October the 14th, and it appears to lift the lid on what's been going on in these negotiations, where it appears the Americans have been stacking the board in Russia's favour. So it happened just after Witkoff and the Americans had secured a ceasefire in Gaza with a 20-point peace plan. And Witkoff basically suggested to Ushakov, look, let's do the same thing on Ukraine. And so it appears that's where that 28-point plan, the one that first surfaced last week, stemmed from. It was very one-sided, very much in Russia's favour, and now it appears we know why. Not only that, Witkoff suggested to Ushakov, look, why don't you get Vladimir Putin to call Donald Trump, congratulate him on Gaza, and then suggest this similar style peace plan, and do it the day before Zelensky comes to the White House. This happened last month. And that was a meeting that did not go to plan or well for the Ukrainians. Zelensky went into it thinking Trump was on their side, that he may even greenlight the use of long-range Tomahawk missiles, but instead it descended into a shouting match. And now, again, it appears we know why, because the goalposts had changed. Now, Donald Trump has dismissed reports of this phone call, saying it's a standard negotiating tactic. Russia has downplayed it too, saying it's an attempt to hinder the leak, an attempt to hinder the peace progress. But this matters. It really matters because it appears to confirm what a lot of people have long feared, that the Americans are not honest brokers in this process.
Thank you very much indeed. Good to have you on, as always.
Right, let's return now to the top story of the day, of course, the long-awaited budget at lunchtime. Let's talk about it now with Conservative peer and financier Baroness Morrissey. Helena, a very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Morning, it's a pleasure.
We were trying to work out all of the topics to touch on with you. And I actually, the first one, the top one we wanted to start with is whether or not you have sympathy for Rachel Reeves ahead of today in terms of both the tough job that she's got on today's budget, but more broadly, as a woman in the world of finance and politics.
Well, she occupies one of the 4 great offices of state as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Obviously a huge privilege, great achievement for her to get that office. But really, you know, the job takes great responsibility, and I don't think you can call the misogyny card if you're being criticised for it. Obviously, as a person, I didn't like to see her cry in July and so forth. It was sort of really awkward to watch, I think, and we felt awful seeing what was going on. But I don't think you can sort of say, oh, it's because I'm a woman that I'm being treated badly. You've got to rise to the occasion. You've got to do the job in front of you. I'm intrigued that you say that you feel like she has been playing the misogyny card. Well, she has. I mean, she said, hasn't she, that, that there's an awful lot of misogyny and she's tired of mansplaining. And yet, obviously, women and men are both saying, well, I think you're making a lot of mistakes. So do you think the misogyny hasn't really come into it then? Well, I do think there's misogyny still in the world and in politics, but I think it's really unfortunate for women to have the woman who's doing this amazing big job and who's got such a great opportunity and responsibility to then play this card. We didn't hear Kwasi Kwarteng when he was Chancellor claiming racism was why he was being criticised for that budget. I think it's really important that if you take one of these jobs, you do it to your best of ability and you accept, that it is hard, I was a CEO. When I became CEO, the firm wasn't perfect. I could say there were some men who didn't particularly want me to take on that job, but it wasn't exactly going to help my cause, was it, to say, oh, you're all misogynists and I need to get a chance. So I would really like her not to play that card.
Well, and not only did you not do that, you obviously launched the 30% Club and the like as well, which maybe we'll get to in a moment. But let's touch on the budget if we can. And given where we are, with borrowing so high already, with, I guess, a parliamentary Labour Party that doesn't want to see significant cuts in spending, do you accept that the Chancellor has to put taxes up today? Well, I would rather see her cut spending. And I think that it is a mistake to be putting up taxes. I think the tax burden is already too high. We're obviously seeing people leave the country, 250,000 left last year, 3 times what they originally thought. We're seeing people very sort of undermined, I think, in their personal lives. They feel they're working for the people who aren't working. And I think we do need to get a grip on welfare spending. Obviously, I know she is going to raise taxes, so this is, wishful thinking on my part at this moment when she's already printed what she's going to say. But I think it's a flawed strategy. In terms of which taxes then to increase, are there some less bad taxes to put up? There's been talk of an income tax hike. Would that be better than a long tail of taxes, or do you not have a clear view on that? Well, I think if she was going to, if I was going to choose, I'd say do the income tax, because then you could have set out the hope. You could say, OK, we're going to have higher taxes on income tax. Everyone knows what they're paying then. It's not stealth taxes. It's not freezing the thresholds, etc. People kind of can't work out what is the burden. And then you could set out, actually, this is for now, while we have to get borrowing under control. And then, 3 years' time, we're going to cut them again. It's a really headline, clear thing. And I think people could buy into, if they believed in it, of course, this vision. So at the moment, I know that people use this word smorgasbord. I mean, I think I don't know who came up with it, but it's... We were trying to work out. I think it was Andy some Scandinavian on this programme, actually. Plate, of food, but it was quite nice, herrings or whatever. So I know it's completely different, but it's a mess, because you get to the end of it and you're trying to work out, well, what does this mean for me? What does it mean for businesses? What does it mean for people personally? Whereas if it's an income tax rise, it's painful, but you kind of know the deal. Can I ask just quickly about wealth taxes? Because there's a lot of talk about how some people argue that we tax income too much, we don't tax wealth enough, right? So there's been talking about, mansion taxes or increased council tax. Do you think that's a good idea?
I don't. I mean, we need more aspiration in this country. We need ambition. And what's happening is that people are being penalised, it seems, including not particularly wealthy people, if they've worked really hard all their lives, they've saved money, they've bought a house for their family, and now they're being taxed on it all. And then when they die, they'll be taxed again. You know, we've also got the farmers protesting and the inheritance tax there. So the wealth that furnishes all the public spending doesn't come from the government. It comes from businesses and it comes from entrepreneurs. So we've got to encourage entrepreneurship and we've got to encourage wealth creation. And sadly, again, I think what's happening is the opposite.
Is there a simple thing to do that? I mean, why haven't we managed to successfully do that for a decade? Different prime ministers, different chancellors. What's the obvious solution?
Well, I think it was a missed opportunity with previous Conservative governments, and I say that as a Conservative peer. We should have done more about that. I think when part of it's cultural in this country, I mean, you and I have discussed this on your podcast, that actually we don't tend to, as a country, celebrate success, you know, particularly financial success. And yet, obviously, people can do amazing things with the money that they earn. We should be proud of that. So I think it goes right back to education, really encouraging people to see that they can achieve much. They don't have to be a wage slave. You know, you can achieve something bigger with your life. But that's going to take a real sort of strategy. And that's, again, something that we're missing. It's been very piecemeal, including by previous governments.
Now, I kind of wrestled with whether to ask you this, if I'm honest, because you are such a successful businesswoman, right? And you have an incredible record to stand on.
I feel embarrassed.
No, genuinely. I've actually been wanting, Wilf knows this, I've been wanting to interview you for a while. You've got 9 children. I mean, this genuinely, you know, as a working mum, it kind of blows my mind. How on earth do you make that work?
Well, of course, I'm going to give the very non-politically correct answer and say my husband, because, you know, when we had our 4th child, both of us were working. Actually, he worked for a rival channel, Sky News. He was a financial journalist, and he said, I'd like to go freelance and help with the children, and then he became a stay-at-home dad. Obviously, as a mum, I have to say, I think it really helps for a family because I've always tried to prioritise being around at home. But it isn't easy. Yeah. And obviously, again, I feel, you know, after all of this, you kind of work really hard and then people are sort of, well, the government sort of pulling you're privileged, you're lucky. You know, I went to state school, my parents are teachers. I wasn't in any way impoverished. It was a great upbringing. But, you know, you feel that you should be then, in turn, I'm trying to encourage my children to stand on their own 2 feet.
But I think it is actually a kind of I disagree that it's a non-PC to say that, you know, you had a husband who helped out because, you know, this is a great thing, right?
Yeah,
that, you know, couples work out the best thing for their families going forward. Right?
Some women think that I'm belittling, you know, what I've done if I say, oh, it's all down to my husband. But it is down to him. I could not have done it without him. And I think
that's
in this country, again, we need to recognise that families have children, you know, couples have children. It's not just down to the women. We do have a very gendered approach to childcare. You know, women still organise it typically and pay for it. I'm not going to look at Wilfred when I'm saying this.
And I think actually there's nothing worse than downplaying...
She's a model dad.
I think there's nothing worse as far than downplaying that, oh, yeah, you can have it all, it's super easy, there's no...
Every family has to work it out, what's the balance, what's the dynamic, and there's no one-size-fits-all. You know, that's how we've done it. But it is chaotic quite a lot of the time. I wanted to have an analogy to run up to Christmas with the budget, but obviously I realised it was 3 months ago almost that she announced the date of the budget, 3rd of September. Christmas in our household is the same sort of chaotic, you know, people changing their minds, etc. But yes, but there's a good outcome on that one. Today I'm not quite so sure.
Helena, it's always a pleasure to catch up. Thank you so much for coming to join us. Really good to see you. Baroness Morrissey there. Well, no, we mentioned, Baroness Morrissey mentioned there some of the tractors coming into London, despite a ban, by the way. The Met Police said they weren't allowed to come in to London, but they have. These are pictures from just moments ago coming in past Parliament. That's just around the corner from where we are. Dan Whitehead is there for us. Dan, this was banned by the Met Police. They didn't care.
Yeah, it was banned right at the 11th hour. The organisers of this protest on Budget Day have been working, they say, for 3 or 4 weeks with the police, arranging 400 to 500 tractors to come down to Whitehall on Budget Day, protesting those inheritance tax reforms. At about 3:30 yesterday afternoon, the organisers were told, no, you cannot do it. It's going to cause too much serious disruption. But as we've seen, many of the tractors have come anyway. Let's speak to one of the organisers, Dan Willis, from Berkshire Farmers. Dan, what was your reaction last night when you were told you're not allowed to come here anymore?
absolutely devastated. Absolutely devastated. And being able to get the word out to everybody is impossible. They were coming anyway. The Met unfortunately have scored an own goal here and created carnage. We know it's come from government. We know they don't want to listen to us, whether in the House or on the street. But we need a right, we need to exercise our right to protest. And at the end of the day, that's what's happening today. These are all independent farmers who have come of their own volition. It's such an emotive issue. You're talking about death and losing a family asset, which is how we earn our living. And by the way, producing food, taxing the working people of this country. It's impossible for us to go on,
Look at these young people around you now. All these young people want to go farming, and you're going to stop them doing their jobs. You're going to stop these young people. My son's in that tractor and wants to take on the farm. How can he do that if you are taxing the government to what they are? We need them. We need them to be able to carry on these businesses and do the day to bring the food to this country, the food the people want in this country. The general public want British food. It is the best in the world. That is more important. And this inheritance tax is just stopping all these young people in their jobs.
We need aspiration. As farmers, as business owners, we need aspiration. That's what we need.
I know you've got your budget boxes here, the dispatch boxes. I'll let you crack on behind with what you're going to do. This was all going to happen. This is their thoughts of the budget last year. This was all going to happen outside Downing Street. It was all approved, according to the Met Police, but cancelled at the 11th hour. Many of the farmers had come from Yorkshire. They had come from Somerset down here to protest. They've been pushed to a side road here by the Farmers Club instead of being allowed outside Downing Street, and instead they're holding their protest here. Shredding last year's budget is the picture that they wanted to see outside Downing Street today. Instead, as I say, they're doing it, being kettled really essentially into a side road here. This, of course, is all against the plans for an inheritance tax, a 20% tax on farms worth over £1 million, they say. But even though the government is giving them 10 years to pay, that amount every year is more than the profit that they make, so they wouldn't be able to afford it, and it would see many of the smaller farms shut. They will stay here until budget, and they are still pushing the government to reform. Of course, the government insists that it does back British farmers and that it will be a very small percentage of the biggest farms who will actually be liable for the cost. Many of these guys here simply don't agree.
Dan, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. And Sophie, I have to say, they do have good props for their
yeah, they do
for their protest, more than other sectors do. And I was thinking, might be the first day my 2-year-old son has enjoyed watching the show because he loves tractors.
Exactly, get all the tractor content on there. I love it.
Whether or not it does anything remains to be seen. They're not the focus point of this budget. It's almost as if they're protesting a year too late on this. And I think as other taxes go up, it'll be even harder for them to make the case that the tax increase they faced a year ago deserves to be overturned.
We should talk about another story on the programme today, which we're going to be doing after the break. And this is the idea that jury trials could be scrapped for all but rape, manslaughter and murder cases. I mean, if this happens, genuinely, it is going to be a massive deal. We're going to be talking to Wendy Joseph KC, who's a former Old Bailey judge.
This is the moment Kim's life changed forever.
Mum, the doctor's coming in a minute and he's going to tell you that they need to amputate all your limbs. I didn't want to live like this.
This is the story of how she cheated death, rebuilt her life, and the extraordinary NHS team who made it happen.
This is the most precious gift I've ever received in my life.
we are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. Let's get you up to speed on the top headlines. The Chancellor's promising to take fair and necessary choices in her budget today as she tries to balance commitments to economic growth and keeping government spending under control. Rachel Reeves will deliver her budgets to the Commons this lunchtime and is expected to announce a series of tax rises in an attempt to plug an estimated £30 billion black hole in the public finances.
Donald Trump has said discussions over his Ukraine peace plan are progressing well and Russia's making concessions. Speaking to reporters on Air Force One last night, the US president refused to commit to a new deadline for securing peace, but said his special envoy will be travelling to Russia for talks next week.
Lawyers have criticised proposed plans from the Justice Secretary to reform the jury service, which would see only the most serious of cases put before a jury. The Law Society says the curbs aimed at reducing the court backlogs will go too far. Sky News understands the changes are expected to be formally announced next week.
Now, a lot of what we hear today is going to be, I think it's fair to say, quite confusing, perhaps deliberately so as well. Bond markets, gilt yields, it's very reasonable to ask, what on earth does all of this mean for me?
Well, here are some potential changes that could impact the pound in your pocket. The minimum wage is going to rise from £12.71 to £12.71 an hour, for people 21 and over. But we do expect income tax thresholds to be frozen, pushing more people into paying higher tax.
So a raid on salary sacrifice schemes would mean anyone putting more of their monthly earnings into a pension pot would also soon be paying tax on it.
And it's widely believed that the tax-free limit on cash ISA savings will be cut from £20,000 to £12,000. Well, joining us to discuss all of this is the personal finance expert, Iona Bain. Iona, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I'm actually going to start with the middle one of that, so not the order we presented it.
That's fine.
On pensions.
Rip it all up.
So talk to us about what... This isn't confirmed yet, but it's rumoured. If those of us who save into our pension, it kind of happens automatically, your company helps you with it, they might make that harder. That's the rumour.
Well, what the rumour is about is a potential cap on how much people can put into a salary sacrifice scheme. So salary sacrifice is when you give up a bit of your salary in exchange for a non-cash benefit. And that could include putting that money into a pension pot. But it could also cover things like payments for a car, medical insurance, a cycle to work scheme. So it's not just pensions, but of course lots of employees do take advantage of salary sacrifice to be able to boost their pension pot. And you might be asking, well, what's the advantage of that? Obviously, it's a good thing to save more for your pension if you can, but also you are paying less tax, both in terms of income tax and national insurance because your take-home pay is lower. And crucially, your employer also pays less national insurance. So it's a win-win for both the worker and their boss. But the problem is if you end up capping that amount, it really takes away a lot of the appeal of using a salary sacrifice scheme, and employers will end up paying more in terms of national insurance as well. So that's one reason why the pensions industry has been somewhat up in arms about these rumoured changes, has been mounting a kind of last-ditch attempt to get the Chancellor to rethink this, because the pension industry's argument is that we're not saving enough for our retirement anyway, and these sorts of measures really don't help people to put more aside for their future when they maybe really need to.
Can I talk about cost of living? Because look, we've been getting so many emails in today, I should say, from people who are really worried about the cost of living. I just want to kind of bring you a couple of them. So this is John. He says he's 75 years old. He cannot live on his meagre pension of £220 a week, so he still has to go to work 6 days a week. And he's talking about, the cost of living, right, that he's having to face. Someone else as well, he's talking about the cost of, this is John saying the cost of gas and electricity is never going to go down as well. We've got an awful lot of people basically saying that actually energy prices in particular are really hitting them. What are we going to see, do you think, to help these kind of things, if anything?
I think Rachel Reeves is very aware that energy bills are hitting people where it hurts at the moment, and that's why we've seen some rumours that perhaps VAT will be scrapped on energy bills, but maybe that won't happen, and instead we could see environmental and green levies that are put on energy bills removed, and those levies instead funded from general taxation. So that might help with energy bills, but it probably won't bring them down in the way that most of us would like to see. And it was interesting you mentioned there about, somebody really struggling on their pension income. If we look at the frozen tax thresholds that are being rumoured, and the fact that they could be extended beyond 2028, that could end up affecting pensioners, because actually in a few years' time you could have a situation where people who are getting an income solely from their state pension are having to pay tax on it and are literally being sent a tax bill in the post and could get quite a nasty surprise. So it'll be interesting to see what the reaction to that will be, how many people will understand that, and whether they'll be prepared to accept that.
Tell us, Iona, about ISAs, what you can save into them at the moment per annum, and what the rumour is, and the arguments sort of for and against that.
So we all get an ISA allowance. It's £20,000, and we can put that into either cash or stocks and shares or a mixture of both. So in theory, at the moment, you could save your entire £20,000 allowance into a cash ISA or into a stocks and shares ISA. Now, the rumour today is that Rachel Reeves will cut the amount that you can put into cash to £12,000. So that means that you could still save the full £20,000 in stocks and shares, but only save £12,000 of your allowance in cash. So that has the effect, obviously, of ensuring that people who are using cash ISAs quite prolifically, that they may end up having to pay more tax on their interest. But the reason why the Chancellor wants to do this is to encourage people to put more money into the stock market, in theory, to try to promote growth and to try to get people to invest in infrastructure and British business. Whether it will actually achieve that aim or not is debatable, because there are lots of people who do need to save in cash, and that's why potentially this could also be a little bit unpopular with savers.
It's really interesting. We've got another email through as well from someone who's watching live in Australia, which I always love. It's always an excuse just to...
I know, what are they doing at sort of 8 p.m?
I know, I love it. They're watching us, great. But they were basically just saying how worried they are about the impact this budget is going to have. They've got, certain investments that they have put in place to look after their kids. They're looking at ISAs, stuff like that, and they are saying are we worried about the impact of the bond markets after the budget? I mean, Wilf, I know that's something that you kind of watch quite a lot as well, right?
Well, I think the key thing on this, and actually Lord Hammond touched on it a little bit, is we're not expecting big spending cuts today, but does the Chancellor outline a narrative that convinces people that there will be some kind of restraint to the pace of growth in spending? This isn't even about what the government does today. It's those reports that we've had in the last 6 months that give a forecast for the next 30, 40 years, where if we continue on the current pace of how much spending is growing a lot more than the tax take is coming, we're going to bankrupt ourselves. So even if she doesn't cut spending today, she has to convince people that she gets the memo. She'll be able to cajole her own MPs in the years ahead. If you don't get that, then you might see the borrowing costs that the government faces rise, the bond market fall out of bed. And as much as some people want to say, well, we shouldn't be ad hoc to the bond markets, they are the people that fund the government. So you kind of have to keep an eye on it.
Really, really interesting. Iona, thank you so much. I should say I'm going to be here kind of throughout the day with the budget coverage, and luckily for us, Iona's going to be here as well, kind of guiding us through what all the changes mean for yourselves at home as well. Thank you.
Iona, thanks so much. Now, we want to talk about a change in the justice system that could be incredibly consequential. Sky News understands government ministers have been briefed on the Justice Secretary's plans to only use juries to decide on cases of murder, rape or manslaughter. The move would see the majority of cases heard by a judge alone, except for the most serious or those in the public interest. We're joined now by the former Old Bailey judge, Wendy Joseph. Thanks so much for joining us. Good morning to you. Are you surprised by this? I mean, we know the backlog is unbelievably pronounced, and we've seen the reports over the summer by Brian Leveson. Does this go a lot further than you expected, or is it broadly as you expected?
It goes a lot further than and I think anyone in my world was expecting, and I think we're all a little shocked.
Why are you so shocked?
Because what is proposed, if it were to be only murder, manslaughter, rapes and similar being tried by juries, would be an absolute sea change in our system. I'm bound to say, Wilf, I'm not sure that is really what David Lammy can be proposing, because if you stop and think about it, if you draw the limit at 5 years imprisonment, there's an awful lot of cases that will be more than 5 years imprisonment, which are not murder, manslaughter or rape. I mean, lots of drug offences, lots of GBHs, many other sexual offences, robberies, any number of things. So I think it must be rather more subtle than we're hearing at the moment. But what we're hearing is really significant.
One of the other things that people are pointing to in a difference between Brian Leveson's advice over the summer and this memo is when it is a case that might previously have been heard by a jury and now be by a judge, whether or not it's just one judge on their own or a judge flanked by two magistrates as well.
Yeah.
How important is that extra aspect of two magistrates?
I think the disappearance of the two magistrates is very significant. Because it wouldn't just be two magistrates. The proposition was that it would be two JPs, that is to say, two laymen. Now, our system at the moment is that judges in the Crown Court, the sort of cases we're talking about, do not make findings of fact. They give the law, they oversee fair play, but they are not fact finders. And if you stop and think about it, there's no reason why a judge should be any better at sussing out the truth, the facts, than anybody else. The old system, our current system, is that you put 12 minds on the job, 12 ordinary people from completely different backgrounds who will have between them a hugely wide view and understanding and experience of the world, much wider than any one person can have. Now, when the proposition was to have a judge and two JPs, well, at least you got 3 minds, and at least you got 2 people from what you might call the real world. The idea that it should be done solely by a judge, I think, is a really big and significant change.
What, other than the unbelievable backlog, which we've got to cut down, what would be the argument for this?
Well, you put your finger on the problem. No one is saying this is better justice. No one. What they're saying is this is the only way we can think of clearing the backlog. If you stop and think about it, it's sort of what they were saying not very long ago about opening the doors in the prisons. Well, you know, we wouldn't do it ideally, but we can't think of any other way of squeezing any more people in. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Out they went, but they were unrehabilitated, and back they came. So I think, you know, what looks like a good idea for saving money and for getting rid of a backlog with the Crown Courts really does need to be thought about terribly carefully, because it's a fundamental change in the way we have approached justice.
Wendy, thanks so much for joining us.
My
Very much
pleasure.
appreciated. Great to see you as always. We're going to take a very quick break here. When we come back, we're going to be talking more about those farmers protesting in Whitehall. We saw them with Dan Whitehead moments ago. One of them will join us in just a couple of minutes.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
These slums, once gripped by fear and death.
There is far less bloodshed now, but it hasn't gone away.
Who's asking you to kill?
The police will give me the orders, and after I kill the target, I throw the gun away.
We try our best to uncover and unpick a fast-changing and deeply complex region.
These large waterways provided an excellent source of body disposal.
This is the Buriganga River, where victims who'd allegedly been shot dead were dumped.
Sheikh Hasina, how confident are you that she will stand trial?
She will stand trial, there's no doubt about that.
We're going to take you to the very heart of a criminal network, going undercover inside Southeast Asia's scam centres for the very first time.
We won't have any problems with police, it's okay. Just seen Imran Khan leave, and as we understand it, he's just been shot in the leg.
They have decided that the only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
Sky News get the full story first.
Chinese vessels start encircling the boat we're on, blocking its path.
The Chinese are now deploying water cannons, firing it directly towards our boat. We've discovered doctors across Delhi dishing out pills like this, claiming they will provide a lifelong cure for homosexuality.
Rohingya people fleeing an escalating civil war.
The situation here in Cox's is desperate. An already insecure place does feel a lot more precarious.
You can't rule out further tax rises.
It's exactly what she's going to have to do.
She'll be talking about that when it comes to the budget.
We'll be talking everything money as the Chancellor reveals what's in her budget.
This knows how it's going to play out if these tax rises are announced.
I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's data and forensics correspondent. We gather, analyse and visualise data to tell data-driven stories. I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. Let's look at some of the latest pictures of those farmers rolling into Westminster to protest against the measures they saw imposed on them last year at the budget. Not expected to see incremental measures, but they want those last year ones reversed there. That's about an hour ago coming into, well, that's obviously now more than an hour ago, but the tractors rolling into Westminster against the Met Police's wishes.
Yeah, the Met Police said that they weren't allowed to bring these tractors into Parliament Square because the disruption was caused. That obviously seems to have gone down well. You can see that there is an awful lot of protesters here over the inheritance tax that we're putting on farms. Well, to discuss this more is Cameron Kinch, who is a farmer. He's also a former Big Brother contestant as well. Cameron, can you just explain to us why you're here today?
So we're here primarily to make our voices heard and clear of why the especially IHT changes from last year's budget are going to affect us. It's going to potentially destroy British agriculture as we know it in this country. It's hard to describe how much of a change in agriculture. It's fundamental to our very way of life as farmers. Passing on your farm to your kids is why we farm, quite frankly.
Can you talk a bit about your own kind of personal situation? Because you obviously went on Big Brother, and when you were there, you gave this very eloquent and quite kind of moving, I guess, talk about the impact it was having on your own family's farm, this tax bill. I don't know if you could just, tell our viewers the impact it's had on your own family farm.
Yeah, so like farming families right across the country, look, I've got elderly grandparents, and the best tax advice up until this point, in the broad terms, has been to keep the farm in the oldest generation, and it's been working fine. But with the changes coming in, it will mean that essentially you have 7 years if you want to avoid this catastrophe that will come if your parents die to our farms. It's a tax we can't afford to pay. I don't think, when you have return on investment on the farms at 0.5%, and the government expect us to pay a 20% value on our, on the farm, so you can do the maths, folks. You're going to have to sell up the farm. It's really that simple. It's a tax we can't afford to pay because in farming we're not making money at the minute. It is in the doldrums at the minute. It really is. When you have wheat, you're looking at cost of production £200, but you're looking at selling it £170. The maths simply don't add up. And farming is so critical to, just us as humans, quite frankly. We need farming in this country. We need to provide people with food on their plates 3 times a day. It's too important to play political games with, quite frankly. And our domestic food production system in this country is so precious. It really is. We have, such a network of family farms in this country, which is great, because we're not just producing food. We're managing the landscape, we're managing the hedgerows, managing the woodland, managing the waterscape, protecting rural communities. And what this government's doing, they're playing with that fundamental factor of the rural landscape.
Cameron, I have a question about sort of tactics, really, beyond anything. I'm not trying to avoid the heart of the matter that you've so eloquently captured, but today, taxes are going to go up on an awful lot of people across the country, afresh, if you will, when clearly the inheritance tax change for farmers came in place a year ago. So I guess my question is, why is today the right day to kind of protest your particular gripe with this government's tax policy, when I guess a lot of other people might be looking at it today and think, well, the news today is that now taxes are going up on me. And I just wonder, on your kind of communication strategy on the tactics, why you think today is the right day.
Well, I think we have been. I mean, we were here a year ago. We've had many big protests in London. The government aren't listening. I'm hoping today in the budget that there will be something for farmers. There will be a reversal in the IHT change. There's also a lot of other things going on with farming. They are clobbering us on many, many angles. You've got a pickup tax going on, fertiliser tax. In March this year, overnight, they stopped applications for environmental support schemes, which is the lifeblood of how we keep the farm going in many farms across the country. This is, it's something that is just so vital farming. It's not something that should be messed with, because where we get our food from in this country is too important to be messed with. It really is. It's domestic food. Look, the world's a dangerous place at the minute. We all know that. And messing with our domestic food production system in this country, having, I tell you what, the impact it's having on farmers and the whole rural economy is catastrophic. Their tractor sales are the lowest they have been in my lifetime and beyond. And the impact on the whole world, people aren't investing in the farm. People aren't doing anything because we don't know what's going to happen. There's a depression in the industry, I can't lie. And when you've just had the last 2 years, it's been 2 of the worst harvests on record. It's not the greatest place to be a farmer at the minute, I can't lie.
Thank you very much. It's been great to have you on the programme. We can have speaking there to Cameron in Parliament Square, where you can see, of course, the protest about that tax on farmers.
Now, the number of puffins on the internationally important Farne Islands has fallen by almost a quarter.
So this is according to findings from the National Trust, which manages the islands off the Northumberland coast. They say the number of recording breeding pairs of puffins in the survey fell from just over 50,000 last year to around 38,000 this year. So it is a real dip. There is a bit of context in this, though, I think it's quite important to say. because they say that the island was hit by bird flu and storms in recent years, and they also say it's actually quite hard to count puffins, probably because they move around quite a lot as well. So they say that they need to kind of like monitor this and see if it's part of a wider trend.
I mean, do you just count them like that?
I guess that is. And there's a bit of good news about the Arctic terns. Now, weirdly, I am really interested in the Arctic terns because I just read a book called Migrations.
Where's this come from?
I've just read this amazing book called Migrations about the Arctic terns. And our Arctic terns have the longest migration in the world, from pole to pole. So they're incredible. But the good news is they've actually increased by more than 26%, from 410 to 519 nesting pairs. So a bit of good news as well. But yeah, some concern over puffins too.
Well, Sophie's coverage of the budget starts at 11 a.m. Her new show on Arctic terns kicks off on weekends, Saturdays at 10 p.m. And special episode from Farne Islands.
Yeah, honestly,
I haven't even heard of Farne Islands before,
I'm here for it. I'm really here for it.
Who knew we had islands off the coast of Northumberland? Did you know that?
No, I didn't, to be completely honest.
Looks lovely.
No. Lots more budget coverage coming up as well, just after this short break, so don't go anywhere.
From counting puffins to counting taxes after this short break.
Very good.
Yes!
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning, it is 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Rich and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. A big day ahead.
Rachel Reeves says Britain will not return to austerity, but fair and necessary choices will be taken at the budget as she prepares to unveil her plans later today.
Dozens of farmers defy a police ban and descend on the capital in their tractors to protest against the Chancellor's decisions.
We'll be live in Downing Street to assess what Rachel Reeves' announcements mean for you and her own political future.
Plus, we'll be hearing your stories ahead of the budget, from farmers to pub owners.
And we'll also be speaking to a man on an incredible mission to become the first double above-knee amputee to scale the highest peak on every continent.
Insane. A very good morning to you. Welcome to our coverage this budget day. It's make or break time for Chancellor Rachel Reeves. There have been weeks of speculation about what she will announce and how it's going to affect our finances. We will find out this lunchtime. But this morning, she's promised that Britain will not return to austerity.
So we're expecting a raft of tax rises, but the Chancellor is also expected to announce an extension in the freeze on income tax threshold. So that would drag almost 1 million more people into paying income tax. Ahead of her announcement, the Treasury released this clip.
So today, I'm going to take the fair and the necessary choices to deliver on our promise of change. I'm not going to return Britain back to austerity, nor will I lose control of public spending with more reckless borrowing. I will take action to help families with the cost of living. We've already frozen rail fares, begun rolling out free breakfast clubs, and we've raised the national living wage for millions of working people. And today I will go further. I will take action to cut hospital waiting lists by protecting record investment in our NHS and tackling waste in the public sector so that your money goes towards frontline services.
Well, these are the latest pictures from Downing Street. Cabinet is going in. Shabana Mahmood there, the Home Secretary, going into the door of number 10. And there's Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, a man, of course, who's hoping to get a bit more funding for the NHS today. It's been said it's a priority. Pat McFadden, who is one of the most influential kind of behind-the-scenes fixers, as well as the Work and Pensions Secretary.
Well, are we going to hear her say we're going to look at welfare reform again? We will get welfare cuts down by year 3 or 4 or 5. If she does, the markets will like it. If she does, Pat McFadden will have an incredibly tough job on his hands, but a very important job on his hands.
So some of these people will know what's happening in the budget. Others, I think it's fair to say, are going to be finding out the details, so probably around the cabinet table as well, depending on how important they are, how close they are to the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and the Prime Minister. There's Johnny Reynolds going in to number 10 there. It's all a kind of choreography, I guess, before the big moment, Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander going through the door too.
And obviously PMQs to come at midday beforehand, so lots to get to build up. But let's just break down the details that we do know in the budget, because some things have been announced over the course of the last 12 hours or so. First up, Rachel Reeves has mentioned that the national living wage and the national minimum wage will be increased. She's also said that NHS prescription charges in England will be frozen for the second year in a row. Rail fares are also set to be frozen. No such word as frozen. Yeah, my mouth is a bit frozen at the moment. They'll be frozen for the first time in 30 years. And we're going to see a rise in the state pension too by more than £550 a year. That's from April, all thanks to the triple lock. There's going to be a crackdown on benefits fraud. And the Health Secretary has said the government will expand taxes on sugary drinks to include milkshakes and pre-packaged coffees as well. And there's going to be a so-called tourist tax, meaning visitors might have to pay to stay in an area overnight, although it'll be down to local mayors whether or not to apply it. So the big thing, of course, is are you going to be paying more tax? And it was something I was trying to get to the bottom of with the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones. He insisted that the government, if the government were to freeze the income tax threshold, it technically wouldn't have broken a manifesto promise. But just listen to the exchange on whether or not it would lead to more people paying income tax if that happened.
With respect, I think you're dancing on the head of a pin here, right? You know, if you freeze the personal allowances, that means that people will pay more income tax. That is right, isn't it?
Only if their pay goes above the threshold. If their pay doesn't change, then it doesn't change their situation.
You know, but wage inflation happens, right, doesn't it? And also if you're freezing it, as opposed to, you know, it going up, which is what it's currently projected to do, that means people will be paying more income tax.
If their pay goes above a threshold, then they'd pay more than that when they were below the threshold.
So that's yes.
Well, practically, yes, if they earn more above the threshold than they did before.
That was Darren Jones earlier on the programme. Let's speak to Tamara now, who's in Downing Street. She's been witnessing those arrivals. Tamara, do we think there is going to be a united front, certainly from the Cabinet, but from Labour MPs today, even if there's aspects that they don't like about it?
Well, Rachel Reeves has urged them to do that. It's a couple of hours until she emerges from number 11 with her red box, but she will be aware that there is talk in Westminster about the future of her and of Keir Starmer and whether they can go the distance, given that the change they promised at the election has been slow to materialise. They face threats from the left and from the right. She knows this budget has to land well with Labour MPs, with the markets. She's promised no return to austerity, but no borrowing spree either, and of course with the public, among whom this government is looking pretty unpopular according to the opinion polls. She says it will be a Labour budget, it will help those on the lowest incomes, and so we expect the centrepiece to be a rise in the national living wage to £12.71 an hour, putting about £1,000 into the pockets of people on those lowest incomes. And Labour MPs will also likely get something they've been pushing for, which is the lifting of a 2-child cap on benefits, although how will it be paid for is, of course, the big question, and we're expecting not one big lever to raise £7 or £8 billion, which would have been income tax. They dropped that idea, but a whole array of different tax rises hitting, we expect, people with high-value homes, savers, certain people who are saving for their pensions. So there's a question about how it will all go down and whether it buys the government any time, any goodwill to get them through what we know will be a tricky few months ahead.
What's that?
Tamara, thank you very much indeed. Tamara Cohen there at Downing Street for us on what is going to be a very, very busy day.
Right, Ed's joined us to start to break down what this is all going to mean for us. Ed, very good morning to you.
Morning.
What is the first chart? I mean, there's so I want to know what he's prepared for us.
Yeah,
I've done some stuff specially for you, and you may see versions of this later on. But I'll show you. I'll give you a kind of a sense of like some of the big numbers, okay? Because we're gonna get. There's going to be loads. I mean, this is budget day, so we get loads of charts and loads of data. And our job is to try to kind of break it down so it makes sense. And actually, I think, dare I say, actually, that's kind of more important today than it is in previous budgets, because it feels like this is going to be quite complicated. There's going to be lots of stuff going on. But you know, big picture. Okay, so what do we get? Alongside all of the other numbers, we get a new set of forecasts about how the economy is doing. So how fast is economic growth growing at the moment or in the coming years? And here's what's significant, okay? So this is what was forecast last time around. You've got 1% in this year that we're in at the moment, and then 1.9, 1.8, 1.7. So it looks kind of strong, doesn't it, going out into the future? We get the new numbers from the Office of Budget Responsibility on this. And you know, obviously we don't know those until they come out, but here's what at least one forecaster thinks it could be. This is kind of close to consensus. So that's Capital Economics, and they basically say, look, a bit stronger this year, so there is good news there, but now look at the next few years. So weaker in the next year, weaker the year after that, weaker. And actually that's in line with what Sam Coates was telling us just yesterday, that actually there's going to be a downgrade to the growth forecast in each of the next few years. As I say, these are just forecasts by independent forecasters, but give you a pretty good sense of what people in markets think. So that's the state of the wider economy. And here's the issue. If the economy isn't growing so fast, that means there's less money coming into the Exchequer, which means there's even bigger a hole that she has to fill if she's going to keep to her fiscal rules. And then that brings us back to this, the size of the budget deficit. This is how much money the government is borrowing each year. That was the forecast last time around. Look at where the bars might well be this time around. Again, this is a kind of forecast. And you are talking about slightly more borrowing this year, but slightly less in the coming years. And that brings us on to the famous fiscal rules. Rachel Reeves has set herself these fiscal rules, which we've been banging on about for a long time, haven't we? And here is what actually One of the rules. There's two. I'm going to spare you. We'll do one of the rules this time around. And because this is maybe next time. But this is the rule that is the most binding one for her, and it basically says by the kind of 5th year of the forecast, you need to have that. I know it looks like it's in negative territory, but it's a negative deficit, so that's technically a surplus. Basically, it needs to be below the line, and it is by £9.9 billion. You probably recall this if you've been following this soap opera about headroom and the fiscal rules and all of this nonsense. And it's not nonsense, it's all really important, but people have been going on about it so much. Then you'll know that £9.9 billion, because that is the target that a lot of people say has been eroded away and by all of these U-turns and the fact that there's less money coming in. And so the question is, what happens to that bar? This is all important. We don't normally focus that much on the current budget, the cyclically adjusted current budget. But this time around, we are going to be looking at that a lot. And for what it's worth, Capital Economics thinks that might end up being much bigger. But, enormous but here, that depends on how much extra work is being done in terms of tax rises. So that basically represents a lot of tax rises, potentially some spending cuts as well, and quite a lot of pain. And that's, I think that's, the key thing. Can I do one more? Have I got time for one more? OK. I'm skipping over the other fiscal rule, just to give you a sense of, so there is some restraint here. But this is not kind of something that we normally kind of focus on, which is showing you just how many measures there are in budgets, OK? And this is getting to that point I said earlier. This is going to be quite complicated. And hopefully, we're going to try our hardest to try and make it simple to you. But look back into the 1970s and the 1990s and the 2000s. These bars are quite low. And what are these bars showing you? They're showing you how many different tax measures there are in each budget. So you didn't have all that many tax measures. But boy, when there were tax decisions, they were quite big things. 1975, that was actually the last time that the basic rate of income tax was increased. And you heard Darren Jones just talking earlier on, they're not going to raise the basic rate of income tax. Well, nonetheless, taxes are going up in a kind of slightly more fiddly way, potentially. 2003 was a big increase in national insurance. 2010, that was when George Osborne raised VAT and national insurance. He confirmed that national insurance increases were happening. But here's the key thing to look at. Look, there weren't that many decisions in each budget. But look at what happened after that. Look at this. Budgets have been getting more and more complex. The bars have been getting higher. And, what does that mean? It means basically you've got loads more decisions, loads more fiddly bits, which sometimes go right, but sometimes they go wrong. Famously, that was the George Osborne omni-shambles budget. Remember that in 2012? And here's what's interesting about that. So that was the one which backfired because you've got all these little bitty things all the way down there, all of these measures. And some of them, within there was the pasty tax, there were these other bits, the granny tax, remember that? All of these things, the higher the bars are, the more chance there's going to be something that might go wrong in the future. And here's the other thing, OK? I'm just adding another line to the point here. The scale of those tax decisions has actually been going down. In other words, how big each of these decisions are has been going down. And what does that mean? It means back in the day, when there was a decision, it was like one measure and it was a big deal. Now, roll on to where we are now, and there's loads of different tax measures in all of these budgets, and each of them add up to basically not all that much. The long and short of it is, it's fiddly. It's really fiddly stuff. And where we end up this time around, I mean, I have no idea if the bar is actually going to be as high as that. But, are we talking about the most complex, fiddly budget ever? That's one of the questions we're going to deal with.
And Ed, we're going to be talking much more to you later, but it feels to me like this is basically budgets that are increasingly political rather than about economics, and politicians who are too afraid of the backlash for putting up those big headline rates, right?
Yeah, I think that's that. You've just said it much more clearly and concisely. But no, that's exactly it. It's much more political. It's much more fiddly. It's dodging straightforward, difficult decisions, and instead doing complex stuff. Like, again, you were talking to Darren Jones earlier, raising the rates, the threshold, or rather leaving the threshold kind of frozen. It's a stealth tax, and I think that is the question of how many of these taxes. People talk about Gordon Brown being a big stealth tax chancellor. Actually, look at that, and actually there's some pretty clear taxes. Yeah. This time around, I think...
National insurance used to be the stealth tax.
Yeah, that used to be the stealth tax. This time, for me, I don't know. OK, famous last words, but maybe salary sacrifice. That might be the thing that could turn out to be a big backlash against afterwards. Because I think a lot of people don't realise that they are involved in a salary sacrifice themselves with their pensions because their company is arranging the way that works. So, but we'll see.
That was amazing. We didn't even get the second fiscal rule.
Got a little bit to save for later.
It's back at hour with Beth. We'll be continuing the analysis of what this all means for you. Now, we've been talking this morning about farmers bringing their tractors to Westminster, despite being told not to by the Met Police.
So it's all about a protest against proposed inheritance tax changes, and some of them are already making their way into London. Dan Whitehead joins us from there. Dan, what's going on?
Well, this was a protest that was banned at the 11th hour. It's been planned for 4 weeks or so. Farmers from across the country, from Yorkshire, from Somerset, working with the Met Police to bring about 500 tractors outside Downing Street. Angry at, of course, the inheritance tax reforms announced in the budget last year. 5 o'clock last night, told, no, you can no longer come. And they are not happy about it. You can see, though, a lot of them ignored it and they are still here. Let's have a quick chat with a couple of farmers from Newbury. Caroline and Henry Graham, your farmers up there. And we were chatting just before about you're a prime example of how this inheritance tax reform is going to potentially impact your farm in a devastating way. Caroline, just tell us about that.
Sadly, I have experienced the worst end of it. In 1997, my husband was given his farm in October. Sadly, he died 5 months later in February in a tragic farming accident, with my children being 2, 5, 7 and 9. I went on farming because I hoped one day they'd want to do it. If this tax had existed then, I would have had to have sold the farm, and Henry was 2. He's now 30, and he has come back to the farm and been farming with me since he left agricultural college. We're trying to drive the business forward, which is really difficult. If Rachel Reeves implements this inheritance tax, Henry will have to sell half of the farm or more for him to go on farming. It is so wrong what she's doing to these young people that are trying to go into farming. They're behind me. It's their livelihoods. It's their jobs. We are working people. I fed the cattle and came up here today. We were let know at the last minute. The police told us last night at gone 5 o'clock we could not come today. We have come today. We could not stop everybody coming. We've tried. It is a peaceful demonstration. If I had a different flag or a different thing, you would have let us into Parliament, Rachel Reeves. What is your problem with farmers feeding the country, people of this country, with English food? Why are you bringing it from abroad? Why are you stifling the agricultural community?
Caroline, thanks so much for speaking to us. We're limited on time, but thank you for joining us. As I say, many of the farmers ignoring that last-minute notice from the Metropolitan Police, coming down anyway. We saw them coming down the M4 from 4 o'clock this morning. They've been put on a side road, not allowed in front of Downing Street, but they want to get their message across.
Dan, great stuff. I'm sure we'll be back out with Dan throughout the day with those farmers' protests in Westminster. Some breaking news now. In the last few minutes, based on those ongoing talks to reach a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, well, a Kremlin aide, Yuri Ushakov, has told Russian state TV this morning that a US peace plan for Ukraine was not discussed at meetings with Russian representatives in Abu Dhabi this week.
Well, let's cross to our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett, shall we? I mean, the fact that it hasn't been discussed doesn't sound like the best news for whether it's going to happen.
No, that's right. I think it sounds like they're not in any rush to agree to anything, but it is confirmation from Moscow now that they have received the latest version of this US peace plan. We believe it is this 19-point plan that Washington has agreed with Kyiv, a plan that reportedly removes all those contentious points from the original version that demanded all those sweeping concessions from Ukraine. It was handed to the Russians in Abu Dhabi yesterday, where they were meeting a Ukrainian delegation, we understand, for a separate issue on prisoner swaps and things like that. The Americans took the opportunity to present them this new plan. But as you say, the Kremlin says it was not discussed there. The direct quote from Yuri Ushakov, who's Vladimir Putin's Kremlin, he's his foreign policy chief advisor. He said, The peace plan has not been discussed in detail with anyone yet. We have seen it. It was handed over to us, but there have been no discussions yet. Instead, we understand it'll be discussed with the Americans next week. Donald Trump has said he's dispatching his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who's his kind of point man on contacts with the Russians, to Moscow next week. We believe it's going to be early next week, but nothing will happen until then. So as I say, Moscow in no apparent rush to agree to anything. And will they agree? Well, last night Donald Trump was sounding pretty optimistic whilst he was on board Air Force One on his way down to Florida. He said that the Russians have agreed to some concessions, but that's not the impression I've got, judging by the noises coming from Moscow in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, said that if this new agreement erased key understandings, then it would be a fundamentally different situation. To me, that makes it pretty clear that it's not going to be something that Russia is happy with, that they're not going to agree to it. And no wonder, because it reportedly dilutes all of their key demands on territory, on the size of Ukraine's armed forces, and on a ban on Ukraine joining NATO. But we'll have to see.
Ivor, thank you very much indeed. Ivor Bennett there on the fraught US-backed peace plan for Russia and Ukraine.
After the break, we'll be talking to the Conservatives ahead of the budget.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back. Well, lots to talk about this today. Of course, it is the budget, which means we're going to be hearing an awful lot from the Chancellor, and we're also going to be hearing from the opposition too. And we're joined now by the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Richard Fuller, who joins us now. So what are you hoping for later on then?
Well, can I just start with something humorous, because I don't think there's going to be much humour later on. But
Sure.
Spare a thought today for kite salesmen everywhere, because we're now at the end of the kite flying season. So that's one part of retail. That's a very bad joke. I should not go.
We'll take it. We pray dad jokes on mornings. It's all good.
But seriously, what I would hope is that the Chancellor doesn't yield to the pressure of her own backbenchers to try and shore up her position by leaning in to do more on welfare, because we really do need to look at reductions in welfare, paring back on public spending, if we're to get our public finances under control, and instead really look at how she can get back on to supporting growth, because it looks like the government's prepared to sacrifice that just to appease their own backbenchers.
Sometimes it feels like, Labour are historically worried to talk about spending cuts, and the Conservatives are historically worried about tax increases. Do you accept that some tax rises are necessary, and if so, which ones?
So we have to wait and see what the numbers are. Here's what's so frustrating, right? There are two things. So first of all, it is fair to say, a year ago, the Chancellor said she'd done all the work, she'd got people to look at the black hole. We didn't agree with it, the OBR didn't agree, but let's just give her story about that. And then she said, well, now I'm going to borrow this money, I'm going to spend this money, and I'm going to raise these taxes, and I've wiped the slate clean. I'm not coming back for more. And now a year later, the consequence of those decisions means that she is having to come back for more. So I think the first thing, those choices were really poor choices.
There has been some world global issues as well, though, right? And I accept your point that part of this is decisions made by the Chancellor, but there have been some global headwinds too, and I'm thinking in particular about Donald Trump, about tariffs and all that kind of thing.
Of course, there have been. Things happen in the world. Things happen. That's why a Chancellor, needs to be awake to those things. And Rachel Reeves last year clearly didn't put aside enough money for a rainy day, and maybe that has had an effect. But the biggest effect has been domestic policy. It's been the jobs tax. It's been the pressure on small business and large business trying to deal with these increase in that cost. That's why fewer people now are employed. Unemployment keeps going up and up. That's why we have more pressure on the public finances, because more people are looking to get welfare. So those are results of her own decisions. We do need to cut taxes. We laid out at the party conference 47 billion of public spending cuts, and looked at spend a little bit of that on tax cuts, particularly on scrapping stamp duty to get the housing market going and trying to support UK hospitality.
I guess, some people might think it's a bit rich coming from the Conservatives who put up taxes as well when you were in power, right? A tax revenue as a share of national income was 36% when you left office in 2024. We don't, it's easy to call for tax cuts from opposition, isn't it?
It is, but and look, it's a fair point. And we're under Kevin Bain, we're learning some of the mistakes, but also to look at the context of why were tax rates up from a party that doesn't want to increase taxes. That's because we faced the austerity period where public spending was out of control. We then faced COVID and having to shut down the economy and support British businesses. And then we had, I remember the 1970s inflation.
I mean, is it kind of the same as what Rachel Reeves is saying? It's the inheritance that she had and then the kind of global factors.
But she gets one chance at that, right? So she said that no, it's not. So there are decisions which are exogenous, so things get done to you, right? We didn't ask for COVID to happen. We didn't ask for Russia to illegally invade Ukraine. These things happened. We dealt with them. We then took tough measures, which we paid the price for in the election, including increasing taxes. Rachel Reeves said specifically she dealt with all that last year.
Okay.
So it's all on her.
Darren Jones from the government this morning told us that he thinks that Rachel Reeves probably does receive some unfair criticism because she's a woman. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I think it is, but generally I think it's very tough for women in politics. They get a lot more abuse than men do as women MPs, and I'm sure as women ministers. But I never heard Theresa May, when she was Home Secretary, complain about that. I didn't hear about Liz Truss, even with all things that happened to her about that. Didn't hear it from, in the past, from other female ministers, Penny Mordaunt, etc. So maybe there's something here. I don't know the details. But in general, I think if you are given the role of one of the senior ministers of this country, you recognise you're there to do your duty, and you just go and do that. And I think part of the reason that people are frustrated isn't because of Rachel Reeves' sex. It is because she has made very poor choices that damage the economy.
Great to have you on the programme. Thank you very much indeed, Richard Fuller, speaking to us there. Coming up, we're going to be talking about all the impact of the budget on people on the front line in more ways than one. Pub owners, always, of course, an important slice of society. We'll be discussing that next.
Welcome back to Mornings with Ridge and Frost. We're continuing our build-up to the budget and trying to get the perspectives of people from all sorts of different sectors, business and at home. And delighted to bring in now Angela Urin and also Beth Robinson, who are both pub landlords and owners of pubs, and they join us now from one of those two pubs. I don't know which of the two. We've got the B-Swing pub and also the Coach and Horses. Which of the two pubs are you in, guys?
So we're in my pub, which is the B-Swing.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Sorry, I'm sure that was in the notes and I just missed it. But anyway, it looks fantastic. And I know it's only 9 a.m, but it's tempting to be in a pub proper right now. Question for you both to kick things off. Angela, I'll start with you. National living wage, national minimum wage going up. Is that something that's hard for you to take on or something you think you can kind of take in your stride?
It's going to be very hard. When she increased it last year, it cost me an extra £17,000 a year to cover the cost of the rise, which resulted in me having to reduce from having 4 pubs to 2 pubs because I had to take on an extra 22 hours on top of the 60 hours I was already doing. So, yeah, I think they've estimated it's going to cost an extra £1.4 billion to the hospitality industry, the pay rise.
And just talk us through the kind of impact that is going to have. Like, you obviously running 2 small businesses. Are you having to change the kind of decisions that you're making on a daily basis because of this?
Yeah, so we're going to have to, again, look at opening times. We can't increase prices any further than what we're already have had to do from the last increase. Obviously, we want to make sure our team are paid fairly, and we accept that, but where is all this extra money coming from? We just can't take on any extra costs. The government are going to have to look at business reform for us. They're going to have to do something to mitigate all these costs that they're putting onto us.
I'm interested to hear that you say that you can't increase prices any further. Is that because you just think that people are struggling with the cost of living, your own customers as well, that they've kind of reached the limit of what they can pay for, like a pint or a glass of wine?
Definitely. You know, and it's also the cost of every time you have to do a price increase, it's the cost of having all your menus reprinted for yourselves. So, you know, you've got that cost as well. But we physically cannot put our prices up any more than what they are at the moment. So where we're going to find this extra cost from, I don't know this year.
Beth, often when we hear that taxes are going up or some of these measures are being put in place, it's framed as those with the broader shoulders will carry the heaviest burden. Have you felt that during the course of the last year or so?
Yeah, well, I mean, our industry is the highest taxed industry, and we're not asking for handouts from the government. We're just asking for a level playing field. Like Ange says, prices that we're charging are the highest. We've already noticed a decline in footfall. We've already noticed a decline in average spend per head. And it's not just that people are coming looking for food and drinks. It's a safe space for people to come, and that's what we want to keep it. I want to stay open 7 days a week for my locals, but is that possible? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, you say there about the sort of safe space. What kind of community do you have in your pub then, Beth?
Yeah, so I'm a very rural pub. It's a destination pub for food, but isolation is something that we do struggle with within this village. I've got lots of older pensioners, widowers, and people don't come to the pub just to have a pint. They come for social interaction. I'm a real community-based pub. I want people to come to the pub to see us, to have a chat, to get out of the home where there's nobody else, to stay warm because they can't afford to stay warm in their own houses. That's what we do as an industry. It isn't just a place to come and have a drink and have something to eat. We are much more than that.
And Beth, just to sort of wrap things up, is there an offsetting thing that could be done in this budget that you've heard rumoured or that you think might be coming to help you and your business, or are you fearful it's a question of trying to hope to minimise the costs that get added?
I mean, I'm quite fearful. I'd like to say I'm always an optimistic person, but I am a little bit worried about what's to come today. I haven't had a wage since COVID, so that's only going to get worse. I hope that they listen to what we've been asking for, which is rates reform, lower the duty, look at VAT for us in the long-term picture. There is a whole host of things the government could do to help, and it needs to come from the government. You know, the smaller things that we're asking for, it's not going to work anymore.
Beth, Angela, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Well, we've been discussing what it means for pub owners. There is, of course, an awful lot more people who are going to be impacted by what's going on today. And to unpick all of it, we're joined now by our political editor, Beth Rigby.
I thought you were going to say from pub owners to pub goers.
Yeah, also that. Should be that too.
Not these days, too much work.
Yeah, exactly. And we've also got our
By the way, I'm guilty as charged there. That wasn't a swipe.
We've got our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, here as well. Beth, so what's going on there? What are you expecting?
Well, I think the first thing to say is big picture. This is going to be a big budget. It's big in terms of tax rises. It's big in terms of the Chancellor trying to set the course of the economy, no return to austerity, no more borrowing. And it's big in political jeopardy for a Chancellor who said a year ago, I'm not coming back for more, and is now coming back for billions in tax rises, having done the biggest tax raising budget of a generation a year ago. In terms of what we're going to see, I think there's going to be a sweeping load of tax rises. She's got 20 to 30 billion pound hole in the public finances. She also wants to give herself a cushion so she has a bit more flexibility. So there could be an electric vehicle tax, a milkshake tax, a tourism tax, business rates could be going up, could be a mansion house tax, hits to pensions for higher earners, hit to individual savings accounts, there could be landlord taxes. And I think, and Ed was saying this, and I'm going to nick it, but I'm going to credit you, so really, I'm not really nicking it. I mean, Ed and I were talking about this, and Ed said it's rather like a Jenga budget, because you have so many tax rises that you pull one of them out and the whole thing collapses, because there's a lot of risk in doing that. The advantage of an income tax hike, which they've reversed on doing, is it's one clear, clean tax to raise up to 20 billion if you've done a 2p rise. So there's quite a lot of political risk in it. A cabinet minister was saying to me the other day, there's 4 audiences for her here: the public, the party, business and the markets. Ed can talk about business and the markets, but in terms of the party, I think this is a budget very much aimed at Labour backbenchers. And the reason I say that is because some of the measures that they're going to announce will be to please backbenchers when they are a government struggling. And a cabinet minister said to me this week, this is a budget for self-preservation, not for the country.
So just get it, but that is based for self-preservation. That is basically because of the precarious situation of both Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves in terms of a leadership, right?
Yeah, and look, a year ago, and in the run-up to the general election, there were 2 very clear messages from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. We will not raise taxes on working people. It was repeated again and again and again and again. It was really the rock that kind of everything else was built on in terms of manifesto promises, and also quite clearly a Prime Minister saying, I cannot lift the 2-child benefit cap because as a country at the moment, we cannot afford it and I'm going to make difficult choices. Fast forward a year, there's been 7 billion of reversal on welfare cuts from winter fuel allowance and disability benefits, and they are now adding on a 2-child benefit cap, and that on the ledger would add up to about 10.5 billion, and they're going to freeze personal allowances, and that's going to raise everyone's taxes who are working people. So I think that there is, for the public, a government that have not... There's an accountability issue about what they promised and what they're doing, but for the party, they're actually carrying out measures that will please their backbenchers.
I'm going to be glued to the 3 of you's coverage and at the same time watching the markets, glued to the reaction to borrowing costs in particular, Ed, as we see the measures unveiled. And I think this is so fascinating to what Beth and Sophie were saying, because it's not a direct polar opposite set of circumstances. But what the Labour MPs might want is we're never going to cut spending ever. What the markets want is, yeah, OK, we've accepted it's tax rises this budget rather than spending cuts. but they kind of need to see a narrative that suggests we get the message in the long term. And borrowing costs is a key swing factor in all of this when you put up all the charts and predict what headroom exists or not.
I think that's because we're kind of really ever since 2022, ever since the the period of the mini budget, but also the Bank of England doing its kind of reversal of quantitative easing. Ever since 2022, we've been in a world where markets matter and where they are always, they're always passing judgment because ultimately we are a country that borrows lots of money because we are not bringing enough taxes to finance all of our spending, so we have to kind of make up the difference somehow. At the moment, we're borrowing from markets. And right now, if markets are a bit sceptical about whether you're going to be able to pay that back, they're going to charge you a higher rate. And that is the world that we're in right now. And they have been passing judgment over previous budgets. And we will be watching that, and I think that will be one of the metrics of success or otherwise. And as you say, Wolf, I think for people out there, if you're kind of a bond trader, you're kind of looking at this and saying, okay, A, is there enough money that she is raising through whatever measures she's doing that means it looks like the UK's debt trajectory is kind of sustainable, like she's making things add up. But B, and I think this is kind of back to Beth's point, will the revenues actually come in? And I think, if you think back to the last budget, okay, so there was a lot of taxes that were raised in the last budget, but there were also measures that were going to try and kind of reduce some of the spending, and that was in that budget, but then also subsequently to that, welfare reform, the winter fuel allowance, we heard about that last summer. A lot of that stuff hasn't actually happened. And I think that, when you take a big step back from this, okay, yes, there's a story about the markets, but there's also this issue that a lot of people are looking at the UK and they're seeing a country that is spending more and more and more each year on welfare, and that bill will go up as a result of, if there is this change to the two-child policy. And then by the same token, it's struggling to raise the taxes necessary to pay for that. And the gap is widening. I think the only other thing I'd say, though, is, I think this is going to be a massive budget, and I think it's going to be a very, very difficult budget because I think a lot of the stuff we're going to be hearing about from the government today will feel a lot like the kind of difficult stuff you do in a first budget. And I know, in fact, that some of the measures that we've got coming up in this budget, or at least the rumoured measures, is from a grab bag of stuff that they rejected last time around because it was too difficult. So now they're having to go to the difficult stuff that you might have wanted to do first time around. And what makes it even harder is last time, alongside the tax rises, there was loads of extra spending. This time, it's basically tax rise, and it doesn't sound like there's extra spending.
The totemic extra spending will be to please backbenchers. It's a totemic policy to lift the two-child benefit cap. So effectively, people on benefits, if they have 3 or 4 children, they get money for those children. And it's been a massive agenda for many people in the Labour Party. I think the thing about this as well, Ed, that people are suggesting to me is that there will be sort of talk of squeezing the public spending further down, backloaded into this Parliament. And someone was talking to me about she will announce efficiency savings in departments. I don't know what that means yet.
Every Chancellor.
Yeah, they always do this, don't they?
But that might be the surprise, that actually she backloads some efficiency savings in order to try and reassure the markets, to both reassure the markets and then also it's vague enough or backloaded enough that it doesn't anger the party. I wonder whether that's sort of something that comes out that's surprising.
I'd say if that's the tactic, the markets won't buy it. The markets need to see something credible because the credibility is already tested with things like can we keep these things in check, and they have to U-turn. So that's what I really will be watching very closely, and the markets will react live. If they come out and they do the sums and they say that the only cut here is a sort of promise for superficial savings, I think the markets will vote quite quickly.
I would say famous last words, okay, because I've got my market charts ready. So if something happens, we'll be there to show it to you. That, by the way, is the kind of the typical. I didn't know they were even going to put this up.
But you love talking about charts.
That is the typical movement in the 10-year bond yield after the markets. This is what I was prepping for later. This is a sneak preview. And hold on. And basically, I'll show you the line about that's the last budget. It went up. But look at what happened after the mini budget, OK? So you'll get a sense of what a scary market reaction is. That's the mini budget. My hunch, Wilfred, I don't think we're kind of talking about scary things like that. I mean, I don't know. We just have to wait and see what happens. The reason I think this is kind of the Jenga budget is what happens later on when they have to try and U-turn on various things because they are so unpopular, which is what's happened before and what people in markets are expecting is going to happen. So maybe you get a long-term, rise in yields as people just become gradually more sceptical, but who knows?
We're going to have...
We'll have to do this later, won't we?
Exactly. Hold the charts, hold your horses. I'm excited to be talking to both of you throughout the day. We're going to have so much Ed and Beth Watery for us. That is going to be as well.
When we come back, we're going to have a really awesome chat with Harry Budimaga, who's on a mission to become the first double above-the-knee amputee to climb the 7 peaks. We'll be right back.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Traveling is not just about the destination. It's also about how you get there. Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better. Thank you.
Welcome back. Joining us now is someone on an incredible mission, aiming to become the first double above-the-knee amputee to climb the highest peak on every continent.
Harry Budimaga has already conquered 6 of the 7, and this December he's heading to his final and toughest challenge yet, and he joins us now. The whole thing just blows my mind, I'll be completely honest. So we just pitched you in saying that you're about to do the final and toughest challenge yet. So what is the last remaining peak to climb?
It's Mount Vinson in Antarctica, and it's the highest peak in Antarctica.
And the conditions must be out of this world in Antarctica. It must be freezing, icy. How do you prepare for something like that?
It's one of the most coldest mountain in the world, and also it's one of the windiest mountain as well. So,
goodness me.
Just prepare the kit and equipments and every little bit.
And not that the first 6 were easy.
No, exactly.
I mean, it really is extraordinary. And if you don't mind, Harry, I'd love to just rewind the clock if I can, because you obviously, as we said at the top, you're a double amputee. How, if you don't mind telling us, did that come about?
I was serving with the Gurkhas in Afghanistan, and I lost both of my legs above the knee and sustained multiple injuries in 2010 in Afghanistan.
Well, I can't believe you're saying that with, a positive smile on your face, and thank you so much for your service and your bravery. And what brought you to want to come about to pursue this challenge?
First of all, once I lost my legs, I became disabled, and I didn't have a good perception about disabled. So I thought that I was a burden for my family, I'm a burden for the planet. Maybe I have done something in my previous life, so I'm having it. So I didn't know what to do, and I wasted nearly 2 years of my time. So I don't want other people to waste their time. So make sure they believe that they can do something, but also the people around us who look after us, take care of us, but sometimes discriminate us, to make them aware that, the people with disability, we can do anything. And being disabled, it shouldn't be life-limiting.
That's it's very moving to hear you talk about it like that. It's genuinely really, really moving to hear you, speak about your story and about your perception of yourself. I mean, your perception of yourself now, I hope, is somewhere completely different given your achievement. What was the kind of toughest thing? What was the toughest thing of the previous 6? Was there a difficult moment?
There were lots of difficult moments, but I think Everest was very dangerous because 4 people died on our summit day. We summited very late.
So sorry, 4 people died on the day?
On the day of my summit day.
The same day?
Yes.
The same day you went up Everest as a double amputee, 4 people died on that day?
Yes.
Wow, I mean, that's extraordinary.
And total 17 people died in that season.
That's extraordinary.
It really is extraordinary. And
you were the first double amputee to climb Everest as well, that's right?
Double above knee amputee, yes.
What do you think can come from this? I mean, you're already inspiring to us on what's achievable. Is this something you've seen had a positive effect? Have you met other amputees, other disabled people who have witnessed what you've been able to achieve?
Yes, lots of other amputees are climbing mountains and doing some outdoor things. And some of people even taking challenges, and they send me a message, because of you, I'm doing this. So my aim is to, if you are lazy, if they're feeling sad, and just give a hope and optimism to the people. And if sitting at the couch, and even I can get up from their couch, I think I think even I can change very little things, a little mindset. I think
you've changed a lot. I think. When is the final challenge?
So I'm flying possibly in Christmas. I don't have my tickets yet, but Christmas Eve. So I'll be on a Christmas time. I'll be on an aeroplane to Chile to go to Antarctica.
Absolutely amazing. Well, you spoke there about feeling like you were a burden. Well, you are an inspiration now to so many people, and the best of luck in that final challenge. Rather you than me, I'll be honest.
Good luck, safe travels, and will you keep us updated? We'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much for having me here.
Harry,
lovely.
amazing story. Thank you again for joining us, and congratulations on all that you've achieved. Well, not long to go until the Chancellor presents her all-important budget at lunchtime. Sophie will be back at 11 with action-packed coverage throughout the afternoon. Up next, for an hour, Gareth Barlow continues the build-up with Sky News Today.